Right by my TV, there's a box of plates. Would you mind? Yeah, just because if we have to pass this one, I want to make sure we're showing good. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, test, test, test.
I think we have to, but it's going to get way hot in here.
Test, test.
I'll leave this one up here.
Yeah.
All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our meeting. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we do get going. If you can social distance, you can take your mask off. Otherwise, please keep them on. Once we have public input, any resident of Litchfield is more than welcome to come up. Please stay at the blue, 6 feet apart. Once all residents have had a chance to talk, any employees of Litchfield are then welcome to come up and speak afterwards. After you do speak, could you please use a wipe on the microphone? And the last thing I have before we start is keep in mind what you're going to be looking at today and what's going to be presented to you is still in draft form. It is not finalized as of yet. So I'd like to at this time begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So again, at this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jetty, who will be doing a presentation of the draft for the reopening of schools in Litchfield.
Thank you, Chairman Burke. Now we know which mic is cranked up. That's good. So I want to welcome everybody here this afternoon, and I do appreciate setting the stage that a decision has not been made. We've been working hard throughout the month of July with a lot of work that had been done prior to that. And I will tell you that our task force structure that we had did not settle on a solution. The task force is quite divided. There are competing and opposing points of view about how we should best proceed, and there are action steps that need to be taken in order to select the right path. But we find ourselves now on toward the end of July. Next week is the first week of August, and school is scheduled to open. So we need to get something out in front of the board and in front of the public so that we're able to begin making plans on how to proceed in the year ahead. So please understand that throughout the whole time, what we've been doing is working on planning. So even though the plan itself may not be completed, the planning process has been invaluable. It has raised a ton of questions. It has raised a ton of concerns and a ton of issues, and that I believe we're only going to be able to find a path forward because of all the hard work that has gone into planning. The Task Force Oversight Committee is listed here for you. It's a committee that was composed of teachers and staff members. We're going to get that one adjusted. And so the Task Force Oversight Committee was composed of school administrators, the facilitators of the various task force. We had staff members, parents, and a student who helped to participate. And it was the group that was tasked with trying to figure out how to stitch together all of the conversations and all of the hard work that was taking place. And the members are listed here. This shows you the structure that we followed. So the Oversight Committee, of whom you just saw listed, was sort of the overseer of this, and the original assignment was that they would come forward with a plan to bring to the board, and that the board would then take action and vote on that. So remember that the Oversight Committee is divided. What we're presenting today is the draft plan of where we are, based on feedback that we get today. We have another meeting scheduled on Monday, and it's our intent on Monday to be able to finalize this and bring it forward to the board at their next meeting on August 6th. The work groups who help to assemble all the thinking are listed: instruction, operations, wellness, and technology. And those are the work groups that got into the weeds. They really dug in to understand what it's going to take in order to open schools safely and in order to have an educational plan put forward next year that makes sense and that we can execute. So they were involved in multiple meetings and conversations and work groups in order to come up with the information that flowed up to oversight, who then stitched it all together into the draft plan that is being presented. I want to start by talking about the foundational beliefs. We couldn't begin to do a plan until we first decided what we believed in and what was at the core. So in other words, to build a house, you need to build a solid foundation first. The first thing that we decided is that safety is our number one goal. We have to pay attention to the physical safety of our students and our staff and people who come into our buildings, and that has to be first and foremost what we keep in mind as we proceed. We also have to pay attention to the emotional and social wellness of everybody, because students have been disconnected, staff have not been able to collaborate in ways that they are accustomed to, and so planning for the emotional safety is also a critical part of what goes into this planning. The second foundational belief that emerged was that disruption can be positive. When I went to a superintendent's meeting back on March 13th, Friday the 13th, I'll point out, I didn't know that we were about to shut schools down, but that's exactly what happened. And if you remember, it was for a short-term period, and then it evolved into what amounted to a third of the school year was conducted in a remote shutdown model. So what we've had to do is look back on all the positive things that came out of that, and there are many. So we have to recognize that when disruptions occur, there are positives. You have to find those nuggets, and then you have to capitalize on them and figure out how to do better down the road. The other thing that we hold to be true is that the 2020-21 school year that we're about to embark on will bring additional disruptions. Every single news story and article, and just looking at the COVID-19 charts taking place across the country, all of it says that this is going to continue to be a roller coaster ride with spikes and valleys that are going to come our way. And so there will be additional disruptions coming forward, and we need to be poised to adjust to those when they occur. The third foundational belief is that student growth is critical. So how we proceed, we need to make sure that we're not maintaining status quo, but we're in fact growing students, a year's worth of growth with the efforts that we're making. So as much as the school year may look different, as much as there will be disruptions that will come, it's imperative that we allow strategies to be employed that will allow our students to grow. In order to do that well, the fourth foundational belief is that less is more, and we need to keep it simple. We need to focus on our competencies. We need to make sure that we have student engagement with fewer academic things at any one time, so that we're able to make sure that our students are able to succeed with what they're interacting with. So finding simplicity and not building a system that is so complicated that it can't be followed, that's something that we are tasked with doing. We really need to find a way to focus on those competencies and keep it simple going forward. And the fifth foundational belief is this: personal responsibility is going to play an absolute key. Throughout what we've been doing from March until now, it's really relied on individuals caring for each other, making sure that they're making smart decisions that help to protect their own health, but also the health and safety of others. And there's no plan that we can put in place that will completely eliminate risk. No matter what we do, there will be risk embedded in that, and the only way to minimize risk is to focus on personal responsibility, making sure that we're protecting ourselves and protecting others going forward. So we tried to embed that into the work that we did. So what are the critical strategies? First, we heard our families loud and clear say that they want in-person services. They want to make sure that their students are able to attend school and to be educated by a Litchfield teacher. And that's what we are trying to offer. We will do so when it is safe to do so, and the details of what that will look like will have to be defined by each school and at each grade level. It is going to vary, but offering in-person services is a key strategy that you'll see in the plan we're going to produce. Second, offering remote learning and support. So we know that throughout the year there will be periods of time where we're going to need to be in a remote learning environment strategically, and you'll also see that that depending on what happens, we need to be ready to pivot in and out of remote learning so that if there is a secondary spike or when a secondary spike arrives, we need to be able to deploy remote services and support. We're looking at utilizing all of the tools that are available to us, both through our staff, through the virtual learning academy that is a New Hampshire state approved charter school, and everything we can to make sure that our students are able to continue succeeding and learning. The other thing is that we believe that weather delays have been changed, not just because of the pandemic, but perhaps forever. That now that we've done remote learning for 66 consecutive days, the idea that we deliver remote services when a blizzard arrives is something that we think we can do pretty easily, and that our staff will be able to adjust to that pretty quickly. The other thing I want to say is that, remember, we do have a workforce, and we have the health and welfare of our workforce to keep in mind. And it's possible that as conditions come along, that we could have a significant number of our teachers and staff who would be out on any given day, and we would need to cancel school or shift to a remote learning because we can't staff the buildings. That's a very real likelihood in the midst of the pandemic, and it's something that we have to be ready for and adjust to if necessary. The committee feels strongly that masks are a critical part of our strategy. We are buying into the New Hampshire initiative called Wearing is Caring. We believe that that is a scientifically based approach. We are convinced that the individual droplets expelled by breathing and speaking are the quickest way that the virus can spread to others, and therefore we have developed specific expectations relative to masks in our schools and our classrooms, and we'll get into those. But masks are an absolute critical part of what we're proposing. The next thing is reframing our time and paying attention to the school calendar. This plan is proposing that we delay the start of school until September the 8th, September the 9th actually, because that will allow us to provide professional development at the start of the school year to our staff. We need to also spend time orienting remote students and families to the expectations at the start of the school year. Remember, when we pivoted to remote learning, we were in a physical learning environment. Teachers had already established relationships and routines in their classroom. We don't enjoy that same luxury now. So families who are choosing a remote model will need time to understand how that remote model will be delivered at the start of the year, and our staff will need PD to make sure that we're helping to present that. We're also proposing some predetermined remote learning days in the calendar, mostly centered around other school vacation weeks. And the purpose of those is to allow a cooling off period in our buildings and a cooling off period for our students and staff. By taking a break and being away from each other, it will allow the building to be fully ventilated and cleaned, and to not have people coming together in close proximity to each other. I think, some people question me as a superintendent. They'll say, why do we still have a February vacation? And I think the key thing is, in the heart of cold and flu season, it does allow us an opportunity to get out of the building and get away from each other and to let the building cool off. That's why we have those weeks still embedded in there. And we're proposing additional remote learning days in order to provide that cooling off period. And finally, we have to remember that we are looking at the minimum standards to make sure that we meet the minimum standards and the time requirements, and also paying attention to our collective bargaining agreements with both LEA and LSS. And the last critical strategy to talk about is professional development. Our teachers were asked to do something they had never really been trained to do. They had training and tools, but they had never been asked to deploy those tools for 66 consecutive days and to teach students without them physically being present. That was a Herculean task that was asked of our staff, and it was asked on very short notice. We did provide professional development at the end of the school year, and there were embedded opportunities for collaboration and PD throughout the time period, but we do need time at the start of the year to standardize practices and to make sure that Remote 2.0 looks different than the first version. So we have a lot of feedback from our parents and families on what went well, but also what didn't go well, and we're making some specific strategic changes to make sure that we're ready to have this experience be far improved over what we did last time. So it'll be work-embedded PD, and also our staff will continue to be participating in outside training opportunities. Let me shift to the 4 work groups. So the first group I want to talk about is instruction, and you can see that they basically came up with a series of key recommendations for us. So we want to focus on relationships. That's critical. You know, you can't get a kid engaged in content until you've established a relationship and they understand how much you care about them as a learner and are willing to help them facilitate and access that learning. So we need an opportunity to focus on relationships. We also identify that common technology tools have to be established. We can't have one teacher who's using Google Classroom and another teacher using a different platform. We need to pick a platform and simplify it so that our parents and students can access their work without jumping through various hurdles. So common tools will be critical. Professional development time is needed. Less is more by focusing on competencies. Having clear communication, and that's parent to teacher and also teacher to student, and utilizing the tools that we have in order to make sure that communication is clear. And we need clear guidelines for remote learning. What is expected of our staff? What is expected of parents and students? So when I talk about remote learning 2.0, we're going to establish that by having very clear expectations and guidelines of everybody involved. Our group that focused on student and staff wellness thought that it was important that we establish these expectations. Health screenings are a critical part of being successful in the year ahead. And we're going to ask and engage with our students and our families as partners to do the health screenings at home before school. We think it's important that families are connected and engaged and know the health and welfare of their child and are taking that first primary step before the child goes out the door, that it's a healthy child who's ready to come and engage in learning, therefore protecting their health, but also the health of everybody else. And so it's critical that our families partner with us and that they take that step at home. Now, I'm a father of an 8 and 9-year-old, and if you think I'm calm and cool, you should see me 2 minutes before the bus is coming down the road and we're trying to get lunches packed still. I mean, there's a flurry of activity that takes place, and I'm a little stressed about the idea that I'm now going to have to add temperature screening and welfare checks. But you know what? I realize I probably should have been doing that all along, and if we have to get up 5 minutes earlier to make that happen, then that's what I'm going to have to do in my own household, because it's really part of what I'm going to have to do to help protect others. So that health screening is a key part. It doesn't mean we're not going to do those at school. We anticipate our nurses will be randomly checking in on students and making sure that everybody is fine. And we, really are hoping that families will not engage in, well, take a couple of ibuprofen and head on off to school. I'm sure you'll feel better kind of thing. This is not the year to be doing that. This is the year to partner with us and to protect others. Masks, we are expecting families, just as everybody arrived today with a mask, although we do have masks available for those who did not have one. But we find that most people are comfortable having their own mask. By now, we probably have multiple masks that we use, and we're going to ask families to have the masks when they send students to school. Desk spacing is something that we're paying attention to. We've measured our classroom. We've determined how we can get the desks 6 feet apart, and we'll be really paying attention to the amount of space in the room. Building access will be more tightly controlled. That's so that we can make sure that people coming in are healthy and are ready to learn. We're going to simplify things by keeping students traveling in cohorts as much as possible. Therefore, if there were to be a concern about somebody's health or a possible exposure to COVID, we would have a cohort that was established that we could circle back to understand how far it may have traveled. I will say right now that this is easier at the elementary level just because of the nature of elementary schools than it is at the high school level, where students are accessing various classes and there's more of a dynamic cohort. But there's some strategies that you're going to see that will hopefully minimize the exposure to the number of cohorts. We really want to, just like we all have at home, increase the amount of hand washing and the amount of hand sanitizing. We will have stations available and opportunities in the school and frequent reminders to do that. We'll be talking about travel quarantines, both for families and staff. It doesn't help if somebody travels to a hotspot destination and then comes back. It'll be important that people factor into where did I go, what were the conditions there, and now what's my obligation to school and to community once I return. Building cleanings will be increased. We'll have strict protocols on how to return to school after an illness, and our nurses will be helping to drive that. We're going to minimize the number of items coming into our building, so we're asking teachers to remove personal items that are not related to the current instruction from their rooms, and to really minimize the amount of stuff that is in classrooms so that it's a safer work environment for students and staff. But we also need students to minimize what they bring back and forth. So if it's not essential to learning, then it shouldn't be traveled back and forth in backpacks. Our staff continues to be trained in social emotional learning. I will tell you this is hard to monitor in a remote environment, but in a face-to-face, live, in-person environment, we will continue to provide PD to make sure that our staff are able to focus on the social emotional learning and also the mental health of our students. And we're going to increase our protocols for student engagement so that we can make sure that we're monitoring the mental health of the students. And also the mental health of our staff. This is stressful, and we want to make sure that we have resources available to staff. Increased PD, we've mentioned, and also just driving home social connections. So even students who are in a remote environment, finding ways that we can maintain social connections. By the way, we are purposely avoiding the term social distancing. So if I say it, I apologize. We're really trying to emphasize physical distancing. It's about connecting socially, like we are now, but doing so at a safe physical distance and not social distancing and isolation. Let me shift to technology. So we are anticipating, again, a standard integrated platform and tool set. Honestly, that is the use of the Google tools that we have and making sure that our staff are trained and students are able to utilize them. We want instruction to be seamless and synchronous. So unlike remote learning where instruction was not synchronous, we're envisioning a remote learning that more mirrors a school day and that more closely resembles teacher interaction live and in real time than we had with the last model. We want to increase communication between parents, teachers, and students, and again, that's through email and also frequent check-ins. The use of Google Meet, for example, will be one strategy to do that. Promoting digital citizenship, which we do anyway, but we want to make sure that people understand those expectations. Netiquette in terms of what is expected when you are working in a virtual environment, and skill development. I have to say, I'm convinced that, again, a disruptive change that is here to stay. More and more college students are accessing courses in an online environment. More and more of us at work are working now in an online environment, and learning a new set of rules on how to act and engage will be critical to our children in the future because they're going to be asked to do that more and more. And so this is an opportunity for us to teach that and to model that. We want to expand our one-to-one Chromebook model to grades 1 through 4. That way we can, again, standardize the equipment and standardize the platforms by bringing the one-to-one Chromebook down to grade 1. We want to provide Litchfield-specific internet resources to students and families So if parents are trying to help and support a child in the evening, there are Litchfield specific training and resources available to support at that time, and provide targeted training and PD for our staff. The last thing I'm going to point out is that with this technology growth that we've experienced, we have to re-examine our staff across the board. We cannot continue to function with a three-member technology department who are basically supporting 3 buildings and a district staff. It doesn't mean that we have to add additional staff, but it does mean that we have to think differently about people's positions across the district and how to deploy them differently to make sure that the schools and teachers are supported. For operations, we will be following CDC travel guidance, and basically the travel guidance continues to be to avoid travel if possible. So remember, we are still in a safer at home model, and there are many families who are practicing that by staying home and avoiding travel. But when travel is necessary, then we will be asking our staff and our families to consider how to respond in terms of once you've returned back. How necessary is it to quarantine? And you can see the current guidelines are listed here. These guidelines shift and change as more information becomes available, but quarantining for 14 days after one has been out of New England continues to be the current guidance. And it's really key for our staff that are thinking about that to factor that in, because that will involve additional sick, personal, or vacation time, or unpaid leave if that leave has been used, to make sure that proper quarantining is taking place. So again, for masks, I'm going to go a little deeper into this. We are requiring that educators and staff wear masks at all times, and we will be requiring students in pre-K through 12 to wear masks at all times, and again, that they bring the masks in. The exception to this will be when seated safely 6 feet away from others, it will be okay to remove your mask. So you can see the board members on the stage who are all spaced 6 feet apart have removed their masks, as I have. So that is permitted under the school reopening guidelines, and it will be up to the teacher to monitor that and let people know when masks can come off. For visitors, we're going to severely limit the number of visitors coming into the buildings. We just will have a hard enough time keeping up with staff and students, and then adding visitors into the buildings will be another challenge. Most vendors coming in are aware that they're coming into a difficult situation with new rules. They're coming with masks on, etc. And so, vendors will be only as needed, only as essential. But the other thing is for parent meetings, those will have to be pre-scheduled, appointment only, and frankly, if we can do it through a remote means, we're going to continue to try to do that. Any visitors coming in will be asked to conduct a screening and wear a mask once they're in the building. School cleaning and disinfecting practices. So basically here we're following CDC guidelines. I will tell you that this is an area of concern of mine. We have 10.5 custodians across 3 buildings, and currently 4.5 custodians we're not at full capacity, let's put it that way. And so all of these expectations of deeper cleanings and more frequent cleanings at a time that we have not increased staff causes me great concern, because I don't know how we're going to keep up with it. We're considering strategically deploying people differently, so instead of 1 person on days and 2 at night or 3 at night, we may have to do a swing shift in there. But the practical reality is that historically we have not been fully staffed in custodial services at the same time that we're proposing additional cleaning and disinfecting requirements. So this is going to be a challenge for us going forward. It's one that we're willing to try to meet. We're willing to continue to try to have additional custodians on call if necessary, but honestly, from a historical perspective, this is going to be a challenge for us. And obviously, we need protocols for if a suspected COVID-19 case is encountered, what will be our response and our protocols to it. And we will be doing exactly what the state requires of us. We'll contact DHHS. We will report the information we have. Our nurse will be the key person to do that communication, and then we will take all necessary steps relative to contact tracing and informing people. I will tell you from talking with other superintendents that because of HIPAA rules and guidelines, sometimes the information causes more concern than necessary. So there was a positive case in a district where they were not allowed, for example, to report which school it was in because it would be too specific and too isolating of the issue. So it had to be, we have a positive case in the Litchfield School District, and then of course every parent would do what I would do. It must be my kid's school, when in fact 2/3 of them would be wrong. It was not their kid's school. But that's the kind of frustration that comes with this as we balance individual rights and individual knowledge. So again, we will follow the guidance of the state and we will follow the protocols that are given to us, and we're going to ask parents to just engage with us as we do our best to communicate in a clear manner about what has occurred. Let me talk about ventilation systems. We are currently doing an audit of our ventilation systems. 2 of the 3 schools have been completed. At Griffin, which was done last week, Monday, they identified several units that needed to be fixed and repaired, and we had the repairs completed on that day. They were done that day. So as there were issues being identified, we were taking action on those issues. Next up was the middle school. The same thing has happened at the middle school. Those 2 buildings are old. The ventilation systems are old. The middle school system is the original versus at Griffin it's been added on to over time. But there is a need to invest in the ventilation system of those schools. We're estimating it to be, all said and done, $3 to $4 million worth of repairs to get it 100% refreshed and up to all of the current standards. But in the meantime, we are working to get all buildings up to code using the existing system and make sure that we are installing the best filters that we can to help protect everybody's health and well-being. So we'll continue to monitor the ventilation systems in the schools. This was pre-planned work, by the way. This is exactly what we had planned to do this year. If you look at the school district capital planning process that's been going on, ventilation systems are embedded into that. This is not a COVID reaction. However, it's very real to the situation that we find ourselves in. We are proposing that we limit non-school functions taking place in our schools. Part of that is so that we can ensure the schools can be cleaned, and with the custodial staff taking on additional responsibilities for cleaning, having fewer non-school related functions in the building will free up time in order to focus on the additional tasks being proposed. You can see here that we're also looking at our common areas to make sure that we repurpose those. So for example, if the PE class could be outside and the gym could be utilized for another learning experience, we would try to do that as much as possible, because this is a large space and you can obviously have more people in here and still keep the 6-foot distance than you can in a traditional classroom. We're examining our unified arts schedule in order to minimize, especially at Griffin, but also at the middle school, minimize the number of contacts a student has at any given time by thinking differently about the unified arts and how our staff are deployed. We're going to try to rotate teachers instead of students. That will help us to, again, minimize the number of people who are traveling through hallways, prohibiting large group gatherings, and using physical guides to promote physical distancing. So just like when we go to the supermarket and we have blue mats to stand on, we will do our best to also provide physical guides to help students understand the expectation. For classroom configuration, again, it's 6 feet between students seated at their desks. We will use plexiglass shields to divide table workspaces when it's practical. It's not always practical, but we'll do our best to utilize them. Again, students may remove masks while seated once the teacher gives that permission. We will maximize physical distancing by removing other furnishings and materials. Windows will be open in poorly ventilated areas. We will use outside spaces when we can, and we will limit cohort mixing. I'm thinking the rest of the items we've hit already, so I'm going to skip that. Now let me just talk about buses for a second. You're going to see in a minute there's a transportation slide coming up, but we are looking at additional monitors for the buses because, little known fact, I spent some time driving a school bus, and I would say to my teacher colleagues that if you think teaching 24 students in front of you is hard, put 50 of them behind your back and travel through Boston. That's a task. That's a game changer. And so the idea that we may need additional monitors to help, especially with a mask requirement on buses, is something that we're paying attention to. We may need additional nursing staff as our roles and duties shift due to the pandemic, or just like it's hard to get custodians, it's hard to get substitute nurses. So with our staff who are most interacting with sick children, if they were to become ill themselves, we need a backup plan. And our food service staff, because of the change in modeling, we're going to have to pay attention to the need for additional food service staff also. So how will we do food service? We're proposing not to have a la carte items, but to continue serving breakfast and lunch. And the goal is to introduce a breakfast program at both Griffin and the middle school this year. We want non-contact ordering utilizing Google Docs or other technology means. I can promise you that our food service staff follow safe serve sanitation guidelines and also are wearing gloves and masks when preparing meals. Our staff who are preparing meals will go through the same check-in protocol that we all have relative to hygiene, temperatures, etc. They will keep physical distancing between the student and the staff when the meals are being served. Staff will use order forms to enter meals into Meal Plus. Condiments will no longer be served in the pump style. Everything will be in portion packets. And tables and surfaces will be cleaned and sanitized throughout the day, and especially between each lunch period. In a hybrid model, if that's the route that we end up going, we're proposing how we would have pickup for families who are in remote learning. So you can see at GMS, it would be at the CAF door, LMS, the back door by the kitchen, and CHS, the back door by the CAF right outside. In a full remote model, we'll go back to what we've been doing with a pickup on Monday and Wednesday here at the high school. And for payment, there's no change in the charges. And a reminder to families that free and reduced lunch applications are available and can be filled out at any time, especially if family situations have changed relative to the pandemic. And that's right, they've now gone online and can be completed online right now. So look for an email from principals relative to how to fill out the free and reduced application. Let me shift to transportation. So again, students should be screened at home and only healthy children should be at school buses. Families are encouraged to ride share or self-transport whenever possible. Parent self-transportation, we're modifying the drop-off and pickup procedures. We know that even in a normal situation, the lines were too long, and we anticipate more parents doing drop-off, and so we're looking for ways to increase the drop-off time and to make sure that procedures are adjusted so that it's smooth and can be conducted more efficiently. So changes in traffic patterns, etc. I would just ask all families when the first day of school approaches, if you're going to drive, pay attention to the communication. Don't arrive at school expecting it'll be the same. It will look different. For bus transportation, we're going to ask families to commit to riding or not riding for the year. We can't figure out how many students to put on the bus when we don't know how many students are going to be on the bus each day. So we're asking families to commit to riding or not riding. And it's okay to say you're going to ride in the morning and not in the afternoon, or ride in the afternoon, not ride in the morning, whatever. You can pick and choose between the two routes, but once you're committed, we just need to know that that's what we're doing for your child, because we do have to maintain distancing on the bus. So physical distancing at bus stops, that'll be a parent and student concern to work out. Masks required. Hand sanitizer will be available when boarding the bus. There will be assigned seating on the bus, and that assigned seating will be by route placement. So the idea is that the first child on would go to the back of the bus, you would then fill from the back forward, and then you would exit the bus from the front to the back, therefore minimizing students passing each other on the bus. And again, some drivers have assigned seating, but this year they'll all have assigned seating. We're going to stick with one student per seat. The exception is that members of the same household, or if neighbors with written authorization say, our kids are hanging out together all the time anyway, well, would you please put them in the same seat? We can make that assignment for that little germ cohort. And finally, windows on the bus will remain open, weather permitting, to make sure that there's decent airflow on the orange Cadillac. Athletics and co-curricular. So my emails are running 2-to-1 over this slide, but as it currently stands, and I have to tell you, this is how fluid and dynamic this is. 1 hour ago, the NHIAA announced that they are pushing the start date from August 14th to September 8th. So schools cannot begin practices until September 8th now. They've pushed it out almost a month. Why did they do that? Because the situation is fluid and dynamic. Because maintaining the safety and welfare of our athletes is on everybody's radar. But that's how quickly these things are changing. So I will tell you that Josh Knight, our athletic director, was selected to be on the NHADA task force that helped to devise ground rules relative to the year coming ahead. So he was at the table, he had a voice at the table, he's heard all of the arguments, he's heard all of the discussions, and he's working very hard to figure out how to maintain safe practicing once we have permission to start, which is now pushed back to after Labor Day. Right now, we are looking at options to play local games. So can we have football games with local cohorts? Are we able to play soccer with local cohorts? What would the agreement look like in order to do that? So we are thinking as outside of the box as we can about what we would propose to do. We know that district transportation, and especially maintaining physical distancing and making sure that equipment can get on the buses, you know, there could be additional busing and so forth that we have to factor in order to do this. And honestly, when we're struggling with trying to figure out what to do with fall sports. So when somebody asks me about basketball or lacrosse right now, I'm like, that is so far out, and the conditions are going to change so much in the next several months that we're really going to evaluate winter and spring sports down the road. So for right now, we're focused on fall sports. Our feeling today and our recommendation is that we cannot safely play football, volleyball, or soccer. The reasons should be obvious for anybody who's ever played any of those sports, but our sense is that we cannot safely have students engaging in those sports. That doesn't mean that we're not going to offer training opportunities for our athletes, where Litchfield students are able to maintain social distancing and able to continue to work on drills and skills as a team. But the idea that we then send off a group of boys to tackle each other in the midst of a pandemic is something that we're just having a hard time visualizing. We are thinking that we can continue sports that have embedded physical distancing into them, such as bass fishing, spirit, where there's sideline cheer practice only, golf, and also cross country. Cross country would have to have some adjustments to make it work, but we think we can do that. For co-curricular activities, paying attention to what we said earlier about the health and welfare of our students, we want to make sure that those social activities, even in a virtual or physically distanced environment, continue to be offered. And so our goal is to keep those going the best that we can. However, we would not have large group meetings, events, assemblies, that sort of thing would be canceled this year because we just couldn't envision putting that many students into one spot. So that is my overview, and I'm going to shift for a second because I'm going to ask the principals to come up one by one and to speak to school-specific planning. And before I do that, I just want to outline that, again, a reminder, the Oversight Committee could not come up with a consensus. So once you get to this level of planning, finding a reopening option that would work for everybody was nearly impossible. And from the beginning, we tasked our group with paying attention to a remote learning environment, a hybrid environment, and by hybrid we mean some in-person services and some remote services, and an option that brings all willing students back to school. So, you know, that option is one where we're looking at about 300 students per building, so we're assuming that about 100 students would choose to be 100% remote, and it would have about 300 students per building coming back. And what is our capacity to run the buildings with 300 students and all the rules and all the strategies that we just discussed. So when we looked at that, we felt that with all of those parameters outlined, that both the school and the district administrators are recommending a hybrid option as the one that best meets the guidelines above. We know from feedback that we've received that that's not popular with some parents. We know that that causes daycare issues and scheduling fluxes at home. However, we feel that that is the safest option to propose right now to maintain what our staffing expectations are and what we believe we can maintain in the building safely. So we're proposing, as for consideration, that hybrid model. I'm going to offer the mic to Principal Lonergan, and he will speak to the Campbell specific plan. It'll be followed up by Principal Lecklider and then Principal Mitchell, and then we'll wrap this up and turn it back over to Chairman Burke.
Good afternoon. First of all, thank you all for coming this afternoon. I really do appreciate seeing all of you here. I want to say, first of all, thank you to all the members who contributed to this. It was a lot of intensive work that went in on behalf of teachers, parents, administrators, other staff, community members. So I'm really appreciative of that. At the high school, we're a little different from the elementary and middle school. Some different kinds of challenges. Most important to us, however, was keeping our staff and our students safe in the building. And so looking at a hybrid model, we wanted to make sure, one, we could keep students safe, and two, we could also maintain a rigorous, a challenging academic environment for the students. We attentive to the CDC guidelines, attentive to the NHIA guidelines. Mostly we want to make sure students are meeting academic goals. Also of importance when we think about safety, and Mike has mentioned this, is the student social emotional well-being. And that's for our staff as well. I will say that remote learning was really challenging. It was challenging emotionally, it was challenging physically, and so remote learning is not something that I'm key on. However, we looked at the blended model, if you will, and a key focus for us was limiting the number of people in the building. If you can decrease the number of people in the building, a core concept for us was minimizing sizes in the room, class sizes in the room, so that we could get 6 feet of physical distancing. And when we looked at trying to do that, Mike Perez, my assistant principal, by the way, Mike, Jody, Josh, thank you all for your help in putting this together. But we went through and we measured a variety of different classrooms. And as we were doing that, what we were seeing was even if we took a certain percentage of the population out of the school on any given day, we still couldn't meet the physical distancing requirements in art classrooms, in science classrooms, to allow for 19 to 20 students in a room. So the hybrid model seemed to make a whole lot of sense with that. Ultimately, our goal is to make sure that we don't have infection and to reduce transmission. And that's why the key to this is keeping the numbers down within the building. When we started discussing this model, Dan Mitchell, the elementary school principal, and Tom Lecknider, the middle school principal, one of the things we all talked about was making sure our families, when we go to hybrid and we have students out of the building, that it's the same alpha out of the building. So we looked at our students having 2 days of in-school and 3 days of out by alpha last name. So A through K would have 2 days of in-school learning and then 3 days of remote learning. And that would happen at the high school, at the middle school, and at the elementary school level. So we make sure that families were together. We also had a discussion just for blended families, to make sure we looked at our blended families with children who were from different parents, and to make sure we paid attention to that as well. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday would be remote learning days for A through K, and then L to Z. The remote learning days would be Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. The strengths of this are, one, again, decreasing the number of people in the building. It provides parents and staff clear expectation of what the school day and the schedule looks like for your kids. And it allows for Wednesdays as a remote learning day for everyone to make sure that custodians can do a really deep cleaning of the school. And that's a confusing term, but to make sure everything gets wiped down in a classroom that gets touched by students, by adults, to make sure floors are all swept and washed, to make sure handles in all doorways are taken care of. And given what Mike said about our custodial staff, they work real hard, but it's challenging to get that work done on a regular basis. We were also proposing at the high school to switch from our modified block schedule, which is typically a skinny Monday where all the classes meet, and then alternating days. Monday, Thursday would be day ones where 4 periods meet, and Wednesday, Fridays would be day 2. We decided to switch that, and this is complicated if you don't understand high school scheduling, but our blocks would be A, B, C, D for the entire first semester. The reason for this is we found that during remote learning last year, when students had to concentrate on 7 classes, it was really difficult for them to do that when we were doing remote learning. If we switched to maybe 3 blocks that they would have classes, possibly 4 for a busy student, it's much easier to manage that if we have to go to a remote learning. Much easier. They don't have to worry about 6, 7 classes. We also wanted to make sure that we didn't have to do significant rescheduling. When we scheduled the high school, we start in March, we end at the end of May. To try to do that over the course of a month, month and a half, physically is impossible. This is an easy transition for us, in particular, to make sure our CTE kids are able to go to Pinkerton and Alvin for the CTE programs. It will require a more intensive curriculum, okay? Things are going to have to be tightened up and narrowed down for students, but I think our staff are really capable of managing that without difficulty. For those students who go remote, the remote learners would meet 5 days a week. It would be done through Google Meets, and they would be expected to attend and do the activities like any other student would do. So on the next slide, we have our schedule. And essentially, this is what it would look like Monday through Friday. The breakdown for this, when we chose A to K, it was actually a better number of students for the middle school and the elementary school. But we have 235 students in the building on Mondays and Tuesdays, and 208 students in the building on Thursdays and Fridays. So which is a number, primarily the concern there is to, one, look at the cafeteria and make sure that we can physically distance students on the cafeteria as they go to lunches. And we can do that with the way the current configuration of the cafeteria is now. The schedule for a second semester would be EFGH. We don't have numbers yet on that because when classes change, the numbers will alter significantly from day 1s and day 2s. Certainly this is going to allow us, we know we can make sure that students who need support services can get those services. IEPs, 504 plans, we're able to do that during the remote learning and handle that through remote services. Some of our really intensive needs students likely are going to require more time in the building and likely to require more in-person supports. Our counseling office will certainly do all the services that they've done. They will be different. They will be masks on. They'll be in smaller groups. They'll also, more than likely, some of those large group experiences, meeting with college reps, having financial aid nights, certainly those are probably going to be done in some remote or virtual manner. Student parking, we're going to offer the opportunity for students to park as we would normally, to purchase parking permit, preference to juniors and seniors, although sophomores sometimes do get that opportunity. Students who ride in cars, either with family members or friends, they get out of the car, masks on, physically distant as they move toward the building, And the same thing when they leave the building and go to their cars. There won't be any different expectations with them than there are for the bus students. Bus pickup and drop-off, there won't be any significant changes with that except for primarily requiring masks. And at the end of the school day, as students are outside, we need to make sure either one, we physically distance them, but that they're wearing masks out there when they're outside. As far as parent drop-off and pickup, we're anticipating a little bit more of that. We're uncertain about numbers riding buses, but the hope is we can manage the parent drop-off and pickup in a similar way. Again, masks and physical distancing. But the real challenge will be if we have a much larger number of parents getting police help in dealing with transportation coming off of Highlander and managing that. As far as passing times in the high school, students will wear masks, physically distance. We will have set up traffic patterns for them. Sure. Okay, thanks. Following the traffic patterns in the hallways and stairwells, we're not going to let the students loiter. And use of lockers is going to be by special permission. So students won't be able to say, I'm going to my locker, unless we have some exigent circumstances for them. As far as study halls, in the past, seniors are allowed to ask for a delayed arrival or early release if they have an A, first block or last block study hall. We're still going to allow that for any junior or senior this year. So if they have a parking permit and they park and they have a first block study, they can get get a delayed arrival permit. This will reduce the number of students in the building during the day, and we're also looking at that for the middle block periods as well, to offer students an opportunity for open campus with parent permission, and if they have a study hall, that they can leave during the B or C block study hall. We're also not going to have end-of-year exams or end-of-semester exams. We did this in the spring. We canceled them. Our objective is to make sure that if we have any kind of assessments at the end of the semester, they are distributed towards students' competencies and not towards an exam grade as has been done in the past. And as far as our lunches, we've changed our lunches to increase them. Traditionally, we have 3 lunches. Now we've added a 4th lunch. We can manage 4 22-minute periods with enough time between them in the cafeteria to make sure that students have a chance to get back and forth from the classes and also to eat. Masks are going to be required until they're seated. They'll be seated 6 feet away, and then they can take their masks off. But if they decide to get up and throw their trash out, masks are going to need to be worn. In the past, we've let students leave the cafeteria to go to the media center or to go see a teacher. We're not going to allow that roaming of the building as we've done in the past. And as far as remote lunches on Wednesdays, the plan would be to have those distributed outside the cafeteria doors on the back side of the building where the picnic tables are. And I'll turn the microphone over to Tom Lepler.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. I just see teachers and staff in here. I want to thank you all for your work last spring, your ongoing work and feedback and support around all of the work that's been happening this summer. I've been a part of the operations task force and the oversight task force, and I'm just incredibly impressed with the amount of dedication, investment, and commitment to this very, very challenging work. So without repeating a whole lot of overview that Bill mentioned, obviously I'll be talking about the middle school and what a hybrid plan for the middle school would look like. So just in general, as a father of 3 teenage daughters, I can tell you that our family goal is to get our daughters back in school. That's the goal. Although we had a lot of good quality family time last spring, that is the goal. So the goal for our students at LMS, the best case scenario is having all of our students back in the school. I think we all agree with that. Given what we're looking at for numbers, our goal is still to provide in-person instruction as much as possible. You heard about the weeks of planning, considered input from students, family, faculty, and staff. And then that balance, it really is a tightrope walk between really what we want programmatically and instructionally for our kids, but then also following the guidelines from CDC, NHD, HHS, get that acronym right, and other governing and medical institutions. We feel that the proposed plan is fair and balanced, be it not very convenient. And we're trying to consider equally the need to return to the school setting, social emotional needs, particularly middle school. We see that as a big priority. Academic needs, of course, health and well-being, and create and maintain a safe learning environment. So, as Bill mentioned, similarly at the middle school, we have about 400 students, just short of that. Our enrollment this year, it's about 100, a little under per grade level. So in terms of our numbers for the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday model, it's roughly 200 per day students in the school. As you've heard, it's a combined in-school and remote learning model. You can see the alphabetical breakdown by last name. The breakdown days in versus days remote, alphabetically, how that breaks down. And I'll just go over to the strengths of this plan. When we look at square footage, and again, I was on the operations team, we look at square footage, furniture, passing time, common time, hallway time, bus transportation, and we consider all of that. Decreasing the number of students in the building by half just gives us a whole lot of confidence in being able to follow those guidelines with fidelity. It provides clear expectation of days in school. It meets physical distancing expectations, as I mentioned, and it allows for the 1 day of deep cleaning. The other thing I think that is important is just pure ventilation of the system. Not having bodies in the building just allows the air to ventilate. You've heard a little bit about ventilation, but that's also a concern of ours. So just the overview instructionally, again, 2 days in, 3 days remote. You can see the breakdown of our unified arts. In terms of our program at the middle school, they get the basic core areas, content areas, and then they also have their unified arts programming. We have the luxury at the middle school, not that COVID was designed for LMS, but we are already sort of clustered by grade level as best as we can be. It's an older-ish building for a middle school, so we don't have pods, but we do cluster students already. And we plan to try as best as possible to also cohort students. It's an easier thing to do in grades 5 and 6 than 7 and 8 due to the nature of our schedule. You can see the rotation of our UAs if you're familiar with the middle school. I think that it's really important that while we are trying to minimize, that we're also not stripping down our program so much so that it takes away from what is really important to our students and our staff. The Unified Arts provide a huge balance to our program, and we feel that they are very important to our instructional program. So you can see the rotation. Support services will be provided during remote learning. Remote learning will provide close to a classroom experience. We learned a lot last spring, to be honest. We didn't do everything well. We didn't do everything perfectly. But as Dr. Jetty suggested, I think the disruption has made us to pause and think about how we can improve and how we can continue to learn ourselves as professionals. So I think it provided us that opportunity and will be a springboard to how we approach remote learning this fall. Passing in the hallways, as you all know, middle school students, they always walk in a straight line like soldiers anyway, so we're not worried about that. We will be closely monitoring that. Obviously, with less numbers, it's going to be a whole lot easier to manage. Class materials will not be shared. Ms. Thayer and I, and by the way, thank you to Ms. Thayer behind me for all of her work, particularly on our scheduling. We've been talking about students not using lockers to start. It's another area of congregation and challenging to distance. Support services. Obviously, we want to provide appropriate level of services for all students. In-person support, remote support depending on where we are, specialized services arranged by the case manager and related service personnel. I talked about passing times, bus drop-off. For what it is at the middle school, it actually runs pretty smoothly. It's just that we are going to have to reduce the number of students that are passing to be dismissed. So we will do that with 2 buses at a time and some alphabetical dismissing with appropriate entrances and exits. Bus pickup. Buses will be parked like they are now in the driveway. It's just that we will reduce the numbers of students that are exiting their buses at one time. Parent drop-off. We don't have a lot of options. We're at the end of a cul-de-sac without another egress, so you come in the way you come in, but you go around the building, and we will manage that based on our numbers, based on how many students are riding buses versus how many are being dropped off. But if you've been to our middle school drop-off, you know there's a 4-car drop-off area, unloading zone, and we will be adhering to that. Parent pickup, the opposite, similarly, and really depending on our numbers, we will be staggering that so that the numbers are not, kids lined up and backups out there, keeping an eye on the numbers that we're dealing with. In terms of just, bathroom use, and this will be a moving kind of thing. It will be monitoring, but we're going to be limiting number of students in bathrooms. As always, they will sign out as they always do. And the nurse will be monitoring symptoms, tracking student symptoms, positive tests, working with families, assist in the plan for return of previously contagious students on re-entry, assist in contact tracing, and of course following the guidelines. At the middle school, depending on the plan, we actually feel that we can, depending on the plan, if it's a hybrid model, and we have, say, 35 to 40 students, we can space them between the cafeteria, the stage area, and maybe a little bit in the hallways. Tables will be distanced, students will be distanced at a 6-foot minimum. We'll maintain physical distancing. Masks will be required, as I mentioned, while traveling, in lines, and when seated, not eating, but I almost drank through my mask a minute ago. So they'll be removing, obviously, as their space during eating. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Mitchell, GMS principal.
Thank you, and I want to start by actually thanking everyone who has actually greeted me warmly to Litchfield. This is how I start my principalship, not how I imagined, but I do want to thank you all for the warm welcome so far. So much of the hybrid plan for Griffin is going to look much like the middle school, but I do want to go over just a few things, which is one, there will be flexibility involved because we know that there are some students whose special scenarios and services are going to require more days. So in those cases, they may be on a 3 or 4 day in-person model, and those will be addressed either by students' plans or service needs, so we have that flexibility in there. However, as it's presented, it would be very similar to the A through K breakdown, where A through K coming on Monday and Tuesday, Wednesday taking that day off for cool down and cleaning of the building, and then L through Z coming on Thursday and Friday. So, sorry, nope, we're good. So I just want to give you a chance to read that because, again, the rationale and protocols, again, are in line with the other two schools, which is to maximize those 2 days of in-person instruction while also then maximizing learning opportunities in a remote fashion. So each student would still, in essence, receive 5 days of instruction. However, 2 would be in person, 3 would be remotely, and I would work with the team, with Mrs. Clinton-Jones and our team leaders as well as the entire staff to determine how that would make sense at an elementary level, and specifically, because at the elementary level, what makes sense in K and 1 is going to look very different than what makes sense with 3 and 4. So we'd work to make it look and make sense at each grade level. So there are a few things then in the next slides that these are actually changes that will take place regardless if we are in hybrid or if we are all in. Obviously, if we are complete remote, these changes won't except for this UA plan. So I want to introduce to you the plan for the Unified Arts at GMS. And what we are looking to do is actually switch to a block style for UAs. And that's actually very similar to what they do at LMS. And so I want to go over why we feel that is best. So let me explain first off what it is, because you're looking at a blue box that probably doesn't make much sense to you. And so what that means is that every class will have a single UA for a 16 to 18 day period. And then after end block 2, they will then switch to another single UA. So just to understand, what that will lead to is your students will not get a grade for every UA every quarter, but by the end of the year, they would have received the same amount of UAs as they have been in other years. So what that does allow for is, if we have in person, if we are completely in person, it's going to allow that those materials don't need to be brought or cross-contaminated across all of the population. Chances are, and actually I could say, UAs will not be able to utilize their space, so they will actually be teaching in the classrooms. So instead of the UAs carting things all around the building, they could, in essence, bring a set of supplies to a classroom and leave it there for the 16 to 18 days, as opposed to bringing it in and out of every classroom every day. So then that reduces the cleaning capacity, although they would still be cleaned. Additionally, by having this, it would allow that if we were in a hybrid or if we were in a complete remote, parents would not have to remember what day it is, because if you were like me, I had no idea what day it was. I was like, is today Wednesday? Is it Friday? Do days even matter anymore? You wouldn't have to remember or even stress that I need to get music done today because I know tomorrow I'm going to get an art assignment. Rather, you can look at it as a block and know that we're kind of in an art block until that transition happens, and then you can kind of focus on music. So that will be a change that happens regardless of how we go back at GMS. You can go to the next one. Another change that's going to happen regardless of how we go back, with the exception of if we're completely remote, because then it's moot, is drop off and pick up. So we are assuming that we will see a huge increase in parent drop-off and a huge decrease in bus drivers. And so what we have to do for the physical space at GMS is maximize the use of the large loop and focus in on the small loop. For those of you who don't, what I'm referring to is the small loop, which is the space in front of the 1930s building, and then the large loop in front of the portables in the main entrance. So we will be utilizing the small loop for the buses in the morning. And so I'm going to be working with Corey Zbicki as well as the transportation department, and our hope is to work with the bus company to time it so that 2 arrive at a time, and then hopefully that will limit the backup that goes onto 3A and crosses over Ann Lane and sometimes can go, I don't know, all the way down to 102. Not that far, but maybe halfway. But what we're going to do is we'll have 2 buses pull up. They will deboard. The students will go in the nearest entrance, socially distanced, into class. That way we can maximize the large loop for what we assume is going to be a larger number of parent drop-offs. Swap it in the afternoon. We're going to work with the bus company to utilize the blacktop space on the playground for buses who could stay there, and then busing students would be dismissed all as one whole at the end, and then all buses could roll together. In terms of parent pickup, we assume, again, we're going to get more. And so we will be looking and we will be releasing specific details on this, but what we will do is parent pickup groups. And so I don't want to say specifically, but for example, we would break it down alphabetically so that it's evened out, and parents would have a specific time that we'd want you to show up. And then we would dismiss that block of students. We would ask parents to basically park the car in the loop, get out and stand by your driver's side door, because we're limiting capacity inside the building, so you're not going to be allowed in. Duty teachers would bring those students out. They would reunite, and then once we are sure that every student is reunited with a parent and secured in the vehicle, we would then let the whole group go. And then it's timed out so that the next group could come in, and would repeat that 2, 3, 4 times until we get all students. We'd have to look at the numbers and determine how many groups, but we would use tags as well as window badges that you'd put in your windshield so that we can match it up. So that is what we're thinking, but we still need to work out those finer details. So those are changes that are going to take place regardless of how we come back, and not specific to hybrid. So I wanted to use this opportunity in this venue to present those. Do I have another slide? One other thing I do want to mention, because I don't have a slide for it, is you notice that the other 2 schools had information about lunch, and only because at GMS we are not going to be able to use the dining room and the cafeteria. So it will have to be delivered, and lunches will have to happen in classes. And that's for 2 reasons. We did measure it out, and at GMS we could fit 6 students per table. And even at a hybrid option, we're not reducing classes down to just 6 kids. Second to that, we're also looking to maximize all the space we have in the building for instructional purposes. So it's very likely that the cafeteria may be used to spread out some of those group support classrooms that we have, where we may have 3 or 4 tutors in one room, or 2 or 3 case managers. So we're going to have to utilize that space as well. So lunches will be delivered by lunch staff and will have to be consumed and eaten in the classroom. So that is the only reason why you don't see a dining service portion on the GMS. So I think that does it for GMS. Again, thank you all, and I'm glad to be here in Litchfield.
Thank you, Principal Mitchell. We're almost at the end, so bear with us. A couple of things. First, I want to acknowledge it's tough to come into a place new anytime, but to come into a place new while planning to open a school in the midst of a pandemic, you can imagine it's been a lot of learning curves. So the assistant principals have also been invaluable in this process and have been supporting the team throughout this. I want to just pause a second and acknowledge a few people. I'm going to ask Mary Widman to do something for us, and then we'll turn this back over to Chairman Burke. I want to acknowledge Russ Blanchett, who is just coming over here, Rob Fay from Litchfield TV, and also Jason Pelletier. We did not announce that we were going to live stream this because we weren't confident that we could do it, and I thought it was better not to announce something we couldn't do, but in fact to get out there that it is being live streamed. So that was something we pulled together at the last minute, and I want to just thank everybody's efforts to make that occur. We've never done it from the gym, so this took a while, but we're there, so thank you. I also want to acknowledge that parents and students have been emailing me and staff have been emailing me. I'm swamped. I can't reply to them all. I've read them all, I read them, and then I unread them in the hopes that I can get back to them at some point. But I just want you to know that as the parent communications come in, I do read those. It's not like they go into some empty box. They are read by me. Also, we established a parent input form, and what I'm going to ask our curriculum director, Ms. Widman, to do is to summarize general trends that we saw. I will tell you that it started off slow and then it had quite an uptick, but we've come up with a mechanism to kind of streamline and summarize those, and so Ms. Widman will do that for us, and then we will wrap up with a few last things.
I'm going to start by saying that this morning when I first started looking at this data, we had about 45 responses and questions and thoughts that came through from parents. Just in the course of today, since I've been sitting here, we're up to about 75. So I'm going to paint this in very broad strokes based on what I have been monitoring and seeing as it's come in. As of about 2:30, when we looked at all the data and the questions and the feedback, and looked at what were people's expressing in their preferences. So some of the things that jumped out, we were almost split a third for remote, hybrid, and in-person. So we all have very strong personal feelings about this. I understand that. But as a community, it is pretty split. And I know that in trying to come up with a plan that meets everybody's needs, that's next to impossible. We have to prioritize the safety. And that's a lot of the feedback that we got through this parent forum was, thank you for prioritizing safety. Make sure you're keeping social distance. And so I appreciate that. Some common themes that we have been addressing, but we continue to address are, the social emotional needs and the mental health needs of our students. Really working around work schedules, athletics, and just everybody wants to return to normal. We all do, and if it was as easy as just saying, let's do it, I know that's what we would all want. A lot of questions around changes to remote learning when we go to remote, or we do have students that are in a remote setting. Looking at, are we considering synchronous remote? Yes, we are looking at all of our options, and really one of the big things that the instructional task force was able to accomplish, which is in the finalized plan, are some minimum guidelines for remote learning. We shifted so quickly in the spring that I know it was a lot of moving targets and a lot of inconsistency. We set our goals as a subcommittee, as a task force, to creating some guidelines that would increase our rigor, give us consistency across the district for our remote strategies, and to really increase our student engagement. They're coming in, like I said, questions and comments are coming in fast and furious. So many of them, as they're coming in, are common and they've been addressed through the presentation or will be addressed through the report. But if something comes up that has not been addressed or we haven't thought of, it will come back to that group and we will make sure to give you some kind of a response. Thanks.
And then finally, a couple of slides, the budgetary impacts. So throughout this, as we have talked about budgetary needs, our business administrator who's joining me here at the table has a spreadsheet. He's been listing and chronicling the cost of doing all of these things. It really depends on what plan we end up going with, but it's at least costed out so the board can see what the options are. That's available for public view, anybody who clicks on that link. You can see the sum total of it is about $750,000, depending upon which route we go, how we choose to deploy or add to the program in order to make sure that we can do this. But there are costs associated with everything that we have listed, or many things that we have listed today. There's a list of resources. These are all great tools. I can tell you we've read and read and read and read some more. So these are among the sources that we've used in order to figure out how to proceed. And at this point, I just want to thank the public for giving us attention, for coming out today, and for being patient in a hot gym for this presentation. And at this point, we'll turn it back over to Chairman Burke to discuss how to proceed.
Thank you very much, everyone. So again, at this point, we're going to open up to community input, and I'm going to ask that if residents of Litchfield would like to come up and talk, please come and just stand on the blue mat. And I suggest not everyone come running down. There's going to be plenty of time and an opportunity for each of you to speak that want to speak. So if whoever wants to start, you want to come on down. And again, please wipe the mic when you're done. Thank you. There's like 5 or 6 blue mats down here, so if you'd like to, a few of you come on down. Thank you.
Now? Yes. Yeah. Claire Chu, 19 3rd Street. My first no. Is it on? It is on me. Yeah? Okay. So my first question is with regards to the scheduling for the high school and going by semester. If you've got a student who is taking an AP class and their schedule is Monday, first thing, A block for AP English, that would mean they would finish their instructional time in February and don't take the exam till May. So what happens in that time? I had gone from my head. What else did I say, Tiffany? Let's put you on the spot. I'll just one question. There you go.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Gandia. I come to you as a parent, also a former Litchfield youth wrestling coach for the town for the last 10 years. I look into the audience here and I see a lot of wonderful families of courage, faith, and commitment and love to their children. I see a couple of wrestling coaches, Coach Pat Algio, Coach John McDonald, who also coached with me with the youth. I think one of our missions for our children in our education is not only academic, but also character development. And I think with character development comes sports, because it's the sports that provide adversity, which leads to endurance, which leads to character development, and brings upon leadership. So when I see that the school board and the school is looking at suspending football, volleyball, and soccer at the moment, it saddens me. Some people call it abundance of caution, some people call it fear. This abundance of caution and fear has stolen some of our freedoms. One of your tenets that was on the board was personal responsibility in conjunction with safety. I ask that you reconsider sports, particularly football, soccer, and volleyball, as a personal choice. If parents and children do not want to participate, that's their freedom. For those that do want to participate, that is our freedom. Do not take it away from us. So I ask for that reconsideration. Up in the stands is my son. He's a senior, Justin Gandia. He's on the soccer team. An hour ago, he was playing on the soccer field with his team. I think those actions speak louder than our desires. They want to play. They want the adversity to give them the endurance to build character and bring leadership. That's as parents what we do to raise our children. I ask that you don't deny that opportunity, and I ask for reconsideration. Thank you very much for your time.
Hi, my name's Hannah Cuvalier. I'm a student of Campbell High School, and I just want to start off by thanking everybody on the task force. I'm sure a lot of these decisions were hard to make, and I thank you all for your hard work. That being said, I do have a couple concerns with some of the ideas presented today. First off, reiterating what Ms. Chu said, I'm taking 4 AP classes next year, one of which is daily, so the block scheduling will not affect that one. But for the other 3 AP classes, if we're doing 4 blocks per semester, I might be finishing those AP classes in February, taking the exam in May, or I could be starting those APs in February and then taking the exam in May. I'm sure that the APs will be first semester, but regardless, that's a good couple of months that I will not be in that class and then still be expected to perform well on that exam, which are expensive. So as an investment in that exam and in my education, I just feel like that we might need to find a solution for that. Also, for the splitting up of the students, I think that alphabetically will work for a lot of the schools, but for the high school, I don't know if it's possible, but I feel like it might make more sense to do it based on grade level, because as you go up in your teaching and your schooling, you take more rigorous classes, and in doing so, you tend to decrease your class sizes. So for example, next year I'm taking AP Calculus BC, which is going to be taught congruently with AP Calculus AB. So while there are a good amount of students in that class, there are only 4 students in the BC course, 3 of which are in the A through K group, meaning 1 student will be singled out to be learning BC by himself, which just does not make much sense to me. I think that would be really difficult. My AP Lit class next year was originally going to have 6 students, and to have class discussions with, say we cut half of it and it's 3 of them, I think will just be very difficult. So I feel that maybe for the high school level, it might make more sense to split it up by grade. But yeah, other than that, I appreciate all your hard work. That's all I had to say.
All right, so do I use Lysol wipes to clean up the dirty Lysol wipes? I guess is a good question. So my name's John McDonald. I'm a parent in town. I'm not as eloquent as Chris, so I'm going to read you my statement if you don't mind. So good afternoon, school board, Mr. Jetty, and administrators. You need my address? Sure. Yep, my name is John McDonald. I live at 18 Rookery Way. My family and I have been town residents for over 15 years. I have 2 children in the school district. Both have made it through 8th grade. My daughter's a freshman about to start at Campbell, and my son is a junior at Bishop Girton. For additional context, in addition to being a parent, I've also been a public school teacher for 9 years, and for the last 18 years, I've worked in talent and learning for a worldwide financial institution, most recently responsible for educating over 2,000 associates globally. While I'd like to make an impassioned plea for in-person education, it feels that that ship has long sailed. What I would like to make a plea for is a focus on direct live instruction. What we did last 3 months of the year was unacceptable. My daughter did not see or speak to 7 out of her 8 teachers at LMS the entire time. All-call open office hours is not instruction. We put some guidelines forth that said teachers would provide a minimum of 2 sessions of direct instruction. I believe those are the guidelines you referenced. Those 2 hours or 2 sessions of direct instruction could be pre-recorded videos. That is unacceptable. That is not teaching. We can get that on YouTube without having to have a staff. Instead, I'd like to suggest that we go to a model that is fully flexible, similar to what was talked about for Campbell, and that we install webcams in every single classroom, and kids can be all in the class, they can all be at home, and they can be everywhere in between. But it would require our teachers to teach every day their regular schedule. Going to 2 days a week of live instruction and 3 days a week of busy work did not work for my daughter. She passed everything, while she drastically lost connection and again never once spoke to her teachers except for one teacher the entire time. We talk about the social and emotional well-being of our children. The best thing our teachers do is engage with our kids. Assigning worksheets, assigning busy work, correcting worksheets and busy work is not teaching, it is assigning. It is imperative that our kids receive live instruction, whether that is in real time in the classroom or whether it is real time on video. Thank you for your time.
Hi, Jeff Hidalgo, 25 Brenton Street. I've been here 24 years in this town, and my son Harrison just graduated from Cornell University because of this school district. An amazing achievement. Unfortunately, he couldn't have a graduation ceremony, which is being pushed to next year, but he'll have it. My daughter's at the middle school, and this last 6 months have been pretty tough on her, but she passed her classes like the previous gentleman said. I think concerted effort by all the teachers and the school board. I really appreciate all the hard work. And this is undiscovered country for all of us. But I think what comes first is the safety of these children. My children, your children, they're our children. Because it's truly, it takes all of us to raise these kids to be the brilliant people they are. I mean, I didn't do it all. My excellent wife didn't. It's all of us. And I owe everyone here a debt of gratitude for that. What I was thinking about was that these are children. They can't make life-changing decisions. I mean, we're talking elementary school, middle school, high school. They're barely developed. We need to make the decisions for them and make sure that they're safe. Safety should come first. As I would love, my question was, is the band going to continue? How is that going to work? Are clubs going to continue? The safety comes first, though. We need to make these decisions. I want to see the kids fail. I'd love to see them do sports, but safety comes first. This is a real difficult time for all of us, but we need to work together and just get this thing done. And I think everyone, all the teachers, everyone did, I think, as good a job as we could have done in the last few months of school. So I appreciate that. I take my hat off to all of you. And thank you. Thank you for that, okay? And everyone stay well.
I don't know where they went. Somebody took them.
Hi. Hi, my name's Amy Ash Lane, 25 Riverview Circle. I just have two quick questions that I'm not sure were answered. I don't think they were. One, and both of them are related to elementary level. One is, what is the plan for recess if we go with this route? Can anyone answer that at this point? Dan, do you know? There is recess still? Okay, my other question about the hybrid model is, what is the plan for what the remote learning piece would look like? Is that, do we plan to have cameras in the classrooms that will be recording the teachers for the kids at home, or would it be like it was last spring? I'm just wondering if anyone has an answer for that at this point. No? Does any? Okay, so that has not been decided? Do you know if that information will be provided to us before parents need to make a decision regarding remote learning, hybrid, or if we're given the choice? Okay. Thank you. That's it.
Good afternoon. My name is Dick Rafferty. I live at 33 Century Lane. I have previously served on the school board for 6 years, and I'm a special education teacher. I don't envy you in the difficult decisions you have to make, understanding that the health and well-being of our students, staff, and community are at stake. If I was still on the board, I would have to make the decision to return to school remotely until it becomes clear to do otherwise. Although unpopular, this is the only way to guarantee the health and safety of our community, which is our greatest responsibility. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Gandia, and I reside at 3 Chamberlain Drive. I am not in favor of the hybrid option put forth today for many reasons, and believe that the hybrid option fails to provide the students in our community with an adequate and quality education, as many parents and students felt they did not receive one in the spring. Upon review of the plan, one of the things that struck me the most was the plan's foundational beliefs and what the number one goal was, and that was safety. I am all for the safety of our students, teachers, staff, and the community, but firmly believe that your number one goal should have been providing our students with an adequate and quality education and the steps of how you were going to do that. If that was your number one goal, then your discussions, results, recommendations may have been different. This would have led to a greater recognition of the importance of in-class instruction and the negative effects mentally, emotionally, socially, mentally, emotionally, and socially of depriving students of in-class instruction. Mr. Jetty, you mentioned how important a foundation is, and the foundation that every student needs is a quality and adequate education, but that was not mentioned or stressed as part of the plan's foundational beliefs, and that is disappointing. Recognize the science when it comes to transmission with the young and children, which is almost non-existent. Put the children back in school 5 days a week, let them play sports, secure their foundation by providing them with an adequate and quality education that will build the walls of their house and open their doors to a bright and promising future.
Hello, my name is Glenn Costello. I live in the greatest neighborhood in Litchfield at 45 Natticook Ave. For those of you who don't know me, I am the head football coach here at Campbell. I possess 2 master's degrees in education, and if you think I'm speaking to you today because I want to compete for a state championship, you're mistaken. I pride myself in character education and have built a coaching staff who share the same philosophical beliefs. As a special education administrator in Massachusetts, I understand the difficulty that all school districts are currently facing with reopening of schools. However, now more than ever, I think concepts like social emotional learning, character education, and increasing the sense of belonging cannot just be talking points of administration. They need to be put in practice. There's a strong correlation between a student's grade leading up to football season and during football season. There's a strong correlation to school pride and a sense of community during football season. My fear is not for the majority of players. My fear is for the minorities that will slip through the crack. From my understanding, the state of New Hampshire has placed a large emphasis on making sure students with an IEP do not fall through the crack, and within the first 30 days of school, you're going to have meetings to discuss the loss of skills for those students. However, what are you going to do for the student whose only motivation in high school is athletics, whose family is on the field day in and day out? Football provides a therapeutic outlet for so many students not identified and protected by an IEP. The connections made with the coaching staff transfer into the classroom. Although none of the coaches work inside of the building, it's not unusual to get an email from a teacher asking for assistance with a student. It's not unusual for students to reach out to the football coaching staff way outside of the season. What will the district do for all those students? How are you going to identify the students to provide that sense of belonging that you are taking away by canceling football season? There is no substitution for competitive football. A suggestion of playing local teams doesn't make sense to me, since most of our competition is north of Concord and west of Nashua, where COVID is not an issue. The goal of Campbell football is not to win a state championship. I know that sounds crazy. My goal is to produce quality human beings that will contribute to the world. And as a former teacher and now administrator, I feel confident in stating that the character education that takes place through athletics is significantly greater than anything learned in a classroom or behind a computer screen. Thank you.
I'll get it, Coach. Tom Adamakis, 11 Century Lane, father of Drew and Lily, students at Campbell High School. First, I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to be heard. As a school administrator in another district, I know it's not easy to put together a plan like this, the hours, the time it takes, knowing full well that you're not going to please everybody. And that's why I'm here. I ain't pleased. Overall, I am. But I just want to understand how the decision was made to, as I see surrounding and peripheral districts still maintaining their athletics, their implementation of sports. Was data used to determine that fall sports be reduced or eliminated, or are we submitting to fear and comparisons to more urban areas across the nation? Our coaches and our athletes voluntarily decide to participate. They understand the risks. I fear ending sports here in the community will only put our kids further at risk, because it's going to drive them to outside clubs, other organizations that have contact with students in other states, thus multiplying exposure to this vid. Also, at the forefront of education is that social emotional wellness that Dr. Jetty referred to at the beginning. Eliminating sports will do harm to that. Students learn in many different ways, and some students do not do school well if they don't have buy-in. Athletics keep kids motivated, committed, focused to keep their academics from faltering. Athletics teach kids far greater lessons than they may achieve or receive from teachers in a classroom or in distance learning. They learn collaboration, hard work, commitment, and focus while making friendships with a potential to last a lifetime. And another quality it instills is loyalty. Coach Vince Lombardi once stated, "Loyalty is the individual commitment to a group effort. That is what makes a team work. That is what makes a civilization work." To eliminate sports would take these kids' loyalty to their school and this community away. And some of those kids might think, what the hell's the point if sports is not there for them? I implore you, let's look at this. Let sports continue. The students and coaches know what they're signing up for. And current numbers reveal far lower risk than what is portrayed on the nightly news every day. A decision such as eliminating sports has far-reaching consequences for our kids, and I hope you reconsider and let them flourish. Thank you. Sorry, I may have gone over my 2 minutes. I reclaimed my time.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rich Lascelles. I live at 236 Charles Bancroft Highway. I've lived here in Litchfield for more than 40 years. I've put 4 children through the system. I've had 1 grandchild graduate from Campbell. I have another who is will be a senior, 1 in the 8th grade and 1 in the 6th grade. For the last 10 years, I've been a substitute teacher here at Campbell since I retired, so I really miss it. I miss the kids, I miss the school. I have a great affinity for the school because I happen to be the chairman of the school board when we passed the bond to build the school. So I have a lot of roots. I heard a lot that I liked in what was said today. I have really strong misgivings about others of it. There's a lot of things that we cannot predict. We can't know what the future is. The only thing that's certain is that we're not going to please everybody. But people have to make their own decisions. We have to hope for the best, but plan for the worst. What I think we should do is start right from the beginning, assuming that we're going to have to go remote. Now, I don't mean to go remote. I'm just saying assume we are, because at some point we may have to. I really liked what Mr. McDonald said about the teachers teaching in the classroom, but then that projecting out so it's live to the students, because we may have students who are at home for no fault of their own, and we have students who are in the classroom. So we have to plan for remote. Now, we know that here in the school, if we have all the children in school, it's going to be hard for us to comply with the guidelines. But we know that some students have to be in the classroom. We can't turn our heads around and not know that these kids need to be in the classroom. They need that live instruction. And through no fault of their own, whether they have an IEP or whatever the situation is, they need to be in the classroom. We have other kids who did very well with remote, okay? But they miss the interaction of their peers. There's a model in Europe where they have teachers teaching in the classroom with the kids that need to be there. It's broadcast remotely for the kids who have to be at home. But then those kids that don't need to be in the classroom are put into what's called a bubble. All right? For instance, we may have a dozen kids here, a dozen kids here, a dozen kids here, and so forth. And they're all participating in whatever class they're in, whatever schedule they have, but they never leave that spot. They're able to communicate with their peers. They're with those kids all day. They come in, they don't leave the particular bubble until they have to. To me, that solves a lot of issues with respect to going back and forth in the hallways and so forth. I like the idea of making use of outside. Open the doors, open the windows. I know we have security concerns. Busing, drop off at Griffin's going to be a real problem. But I really think that this model, the hybrid model of having kids at home 2 or 3 days a week, is really abrogating our responsibility as a society to those kids. We're dividing the haves from the have-nots, and those that are not able to learn remotely, they get left farther behind. So I really, really urge us to not go that way. I really respect what was said about sports. But people have the option of not participating. You have to keep that in mind. So, like I said, I heard a lot that I liked, but there's an awful lot that the big thing is the hybrid model. I really do not like that. The other thing with respect to this remote model is, let's say a teacher comes down, tests positive. We could continue with school. The kids are in school, the teacher's at home, but the teacher's teaching remotely from home. I think that would satisfy a lot of problems. So I appreciate your attention. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Amber Flint. I live at 123 Hillcrest Road. I just have a couple of things that I would like to say. Thank you very much for the task force. That is an incredible amount of work that you guys have accomplished, a huge mountain to climb and with way more to go. So I appreciate all that you've done. I just want to ask not to have Chromebooks one-to-one for the elementary school. I think when we were doing the remotes, I think there was enough for all the kids to go around and extras. I know with my kids, I have 5 kids, all in each one of the schools. It was a little bit tricky, but we could get it done with 3 computers. And I think that was just an extra cost that we don't need to have. I am asking to make sure that you guys have in writing the mental health, what we are planning to do for mental health. All 5 of my kids suffered greatly, and the remote learning did not work at our house at all. Also, I have kids with special needs. I need to make sure that their IEPs are going to be, I can't find the words, I'm sorry, but making sure everything their IEPs are going to be accomplished. I appreciate all that you guys have done, especially Devin. I know that there's been a lot of work with special needs and a lot of ideas floating around, and thank you for cutting back some of those ideas for special needs kids and their privacies. I'm also asking not to delay the opening of schools. I know that when we talked about the task force, we're talking that they were maybe going to delay the openings because of the ventilation system. I'm asking not to do that for the mental health of my own children. Also, the rotating of teachers from classroom to classroom. If you are going to do that in the high school and the middle school, please give these kids a break in between classes so they can get up, they can move their bodies so their brains will work. And that is all I have. Thank you very much for your time.
Hi everybody, my name is Kate Stevens. I'm at 9 Evergreen Circle. I just first want to say thank you. Obviously there's no good answer to any of this and nobody's going to be totally happy, but thank you for all the work that you have done so far. I just have a couple of things to say, mostly what, going off of what Mr. LaSalle said. If the main point of this plan is to keep the majority of students out of school, where is the remote learning plan? We know that remote learning didn't work for a lot of students, but that was the remote learning version that we had in the spring. Is there what's being done to improve that remote learning experience to encourage more people to keep their kids home so that the students like Mrs. Flint's students can go to school and have space to do so, hopefully full-time instead of a hybrid model? On that note, if a family is committing to full remote, when is it possible to maybe switch to that? I didn't see any criteria for when the school needs to be shut down if numbers get too high in the community. I want to see like a hard line. Is it this many cases in town? Is it this many cases in the school? Is it this many classrooms have already had to be sent home for quarantine? Because it's going to happen, so we need to plan for it. And in the opposite direction of that, as everything hopefully by the spring opens up, can students that were originally remote learning, can they switch and go into the full-time school? When can we start opening those classrooms to be, to allow the 20, 25 kids in a classroom? And if we are committing to our busing, can GMS handle a 30% increase of families dropping off? If those people that committed to remote learning in the fall, now come spring want to put their kids in school, how do they get there? Can the schools drop-off circles, can they support that extra traffic? Just a quick note on the AP courses for the block scheduling. This is just an anecdote, but I did go to a high school that worked that same way. We always had only 4 blocks in a semester, and as far as I know, AP courses went fine. I passed all my classes. If anybody needs a school to look towards, I can give information on that, but I know that there are many schools that have been doing this for a long time, and it can work. Let's see. Last things were, I think you might have an untapped resource in parent volunteers. If there's busy work that parents can do, if we're already sitting at home on our computers in the evenings, you guys are already tapped out with all your work that you need to do. Is there can we make signs? Can we laminate stuff? Can we do anything to help take the load off of the people that are already working so hard? And for things like, if motors and things were bought to update the GMS ventilation system and they were never installed, why do we think we have time to be changing out all these filters right now? It doesn't add up. So, and last thing, I really hope that between here and I think it's August 6th is your voting schedule. I really hope that we can get a survey out, because we're working on data that is either from June or from a black and white without knowing the plan. So I think we need another survey to understand. Maybe if we can get a better remote learning environment, maybe we can encourage more students to use that, and then we can get the students that need it into classrooms full time. Thank you very much.
I hate these things. Hi, my name is Sue Rafferty, 33 Century Lane. I just want to say that I understand that education is so important. There's no two ways about it. Everything that goes with it is really important, the sports, everything. And I think everyone would hope that we could move on to the way it was really, really quickly. But it doesn't seem like that's going to happen overnight. So what do we do in the meantime? I had a question. I thought you guys said that you're going to do hybrid once it's safe to go back into the schools. Is that correct, or did I not hear that correctly? Huh? Okay, all right, I wasn't sure, because my question was going to be then, what will you do in the meantime if it's determined it's not safe enough to go back, it's not safe to start hybrid? So I just wanted to ask if you guys ever considered starting remotely. I know that's not the most exciting thing, it has to be fine-tuned, but starting remotely for a couple of months, work into this slowly. Because the bottom line really is everyone has to stay safe. Fear, no fear, it doesn't matter. There isn't enough information. So to err on the safe side, my suggestion would be to start off slowly, set up the remote. Everyone seems to be working really hard on making it much better than it was. And then relook at it October, November. And then you'll have much better feel of what's going on in other districts, what you can incorporate, and what may have to be put by the wayside. So anyway, that was my suggestion. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Karina Carton. I live at 3 Century Lane. One of the big takeaway points that I'm hearing Litchfield saying is that the SEL skills are super important. However, as evidence shows, SEL skills can't be implemented in 2 days a week face-to-face contact. And I'd like to really have the committee reconsider what the hybrid model would look like. There are plenty of other models out there that are hybrid, quote unquote, that do not incorporate 3 days in, 2 days in school, 3 days out of school, where they have school students back into the buildings for 5 days a week. I think that's crucially important, especially at the younger grades, pre-K to 2nd or 3rd grade, because I think that the play that they go through during the day is one of the most important roles that they can go through as a student to learn collaboration and togetherness and civilization with each other at such a young grade. So I think that that is super important for us to think about as we progress through this opening plan for Litchfield. Superintendent Jetty, you had made a comment about that something about minimal standards. I think that we need to really address that, because as parents and students, we should not be satisfied by giving our students anything less but a rigorous environment in which they can learn and flourish, and then be able to go through their life knowing that they got the foundational skills from this school district, and be proud to say they are from Litchfield, New Hampshire, that they've gone through some of the best schools that they can compare with their friends. It's super important that we understand that these minimal standards are creating gaps, and how are those gaps going to be addressed moving forward? As an educator myself, I know that we've had to cut things out of our math curriculum in order to meet the standards at where the students were in the springtime. We are aware of the COVID situation. We understand what is going on a little bit more so than we did back in March. But what I'm asking here is that you guys are taking a closer look at what these minimal standards standards are going to do and how it's going to impact our students moving forward. We had several people talking about AP classes. We may not have that moving down the road, and that scares me because that is something that our students look forward to so that they can progress themselves and go into a very rigorous college or be able to say that they mastered something at the high school and be proud of that. So I'm asking that we reconsider that as well. Again, Mr. Jetty, you had said that we need to get the kids college ready and be able to help them access classes online, but at the pre-K and kindergarten level, our students are not ready for that. I don't know how we can expect that a 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old can be expected to be able to access online classes and find themselves to have a sense of belonging or a sense of membership within a community in which they should be progressing through and having so much fun and connecting with their own peers and learning so much from our dedicated teachers. So I'm asking the committee that when you meet again on Monday, that you truly reconsider what a hybrid model could look like in Litchfield, and that you look to other towns to see what they're doing. And I would like to ask the board that when you are voting on this, you're taking all this information and that you are seriously considering the welfare, the mental welfare of our students of Litchfield, that going to school 2 days a week and out of school 3 days a week, that is not appropriate and that is not what we stand for. We should be very embarrassed that we're even suggesting this. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Liz Valancourt. I live at 3 Crowell Court. I've got 2 kiddos. I've got one at LMS and one at GMS. I've been a teacher for 20 years. I teach in Amherst, New Hampshire, so I'm simultaneously digesting this plan as well as digesting my own plan for going back to school. I can happily say that I feel fully confident going back to my school. We've got many of the same safeguards that you guys have talked about today. My question, I guess, is about spacing. I know that somewhere I read it, I believe it was in the plan, that one of the biggest issues was spacing. You know, if we had schools where kids could safely physically distance, I'm learning to say that instead of socially distance, where kids could safely physically distance, I would assume the plan would be to go back 5 days a week. You know, if they really could do that, we'd be back, or people that choose to have their kids remote would be fully remote. So if spacing is really the issue that's keeping us from going back 5 days a week, I guess my question is about the procedure or the protocols that the committee followed to figure out spacing. How creatively did we think? And that's not meant in a negative way at all. I know at my school, the teachers were asked. We had surveys go out. We were asked by our association how rooms could be used. We are making specials remote every day because we're using the art room, the music room. We're even using the staff lunchroom for classrooms. So we've been able to really spread out our kids to the point that we've now got, and it's a much bigger school or bigger district, we've got 10 to 12 kids now per class coming in. So my question really is about spacing. How was it looked into? How was it figured out? And I would like to really reinvestigate that, maybe asking for more opinions from teachers, from people that have been in the school a lot, how to better use that space. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Hi, my name is Jenny Goodman. I live at 17 Snowdrop Lane. I have 4 children. One is a 6th grader at LMS, and I have a kindergartner and a 3rd grader. I didn't hear really anything about music classes, choir, and band, and hopefully you can release some information about that. I'm assuming they won't get to participate based on research, but it would be really great for those kids who love the arts to kind of have an answer about what that's going to look like for them. I had a question about how the middle school kids will be grouped. You talked about cohorts, and I assume that that means they'll move in small groups to every class together. As you do that, I would ask that you please ask the parents and the kids and be mindful of the groups you put them in, because, friends are really important at middle school, and my 11-year-old is terrified that she would be put in a group and have no friends for the entire year and be really scared and miserable. So I would just love that to be kept in mind. 2 more questions. One, absences. I told my kids that if they have sniffles, I'm keeping them home. Will there be an option for kids who are staying home as a precaution to be able to still do schoolwork so that they're not absent? That would be a really great option, and make me feel better about keeping them home so they don't get behind. And finally, and this is most important, who's teaching the remote learning? If our teachers are teaching Monday and Tuesday, and then they're teaching Thursday and Friday, who's teaching the opposite group of kids? And that's a huge concern for me. We cannot ask our, especially GMS, we can't ask our teachers to be teaching remote learning and in the classroom. That's impossible. And if we ask them to do that, they're going to have a similar model as this spring. And we did our best, but by the end, my 7-year-old was in tears every day because her teacher never checked in. She was lucky to even see her teacher for 5 minutes once a week, and that was not okay. So who's teaching the remote learning? Is there a way that there can be a remote learning teacher for 2nd grade or for 3rd grade, and that's they're not in the building teaching? I don't have the answers. I'm sure you'll work hard to find them, but that's a concern, and we have to be really mindful of our teachers and the amount of workload that we're putting on them. Thank you.
Carrie Douglas, 9 Pheasant Street. I clearly have an opinion on this because, as everybody at this table knows, I have an opinion on almost anything. Just ask. But we'll get to the light and easy question first. You guys all know that academics are very important to me. So has anybody considered the fact that the A to K kids hit the Monday holidays most often? Where has that been factored in? Because my kid, by definition of him being a D, loses all Monday holidays. So I'd like to have some consideration and parity relative to that, so that'd be super awesome. Now, I am not a fan of hybrid. I'm not a fan of the in-person sterile environment where my kid in indoor recess, which, let's face it, in GMS happens way often. So what's my kid gonna do? Sit there at the desk and twiddle his thumbs for 20 minutes? He can't interact with his friends. You're not gonna have any games he can play with. Can't bring a book from home. What's he going to do? I send my kid to elementary school for socialization. And yet every plan I see here, that's the one thing he's not gonna get. I'm not happy about that. So that leaves me with hybrid, no, remote. Except there is no real remote plan. No, we'll go to the hybrid. So hybrid, my kid has sensory issues, doesn't want to wear a mask. Okay, we'll keep him home. But I can't because that's not an option. So now I have to fight him every day to go to school. Now he's gonna hate school. So what good does that do? So now what are my options? Homeschooling? Well, I really don't want to do that. There's a reason I send him to school. But that seems like the only thing I can do because that's my only option because we haven't really explored. Then we have special ed students whose IEPs really need 5 days services and they're not going to get it. You're going to have them in school 2 days a week, and of those 2 days, they're going to be pulled for services. So when are they also going to get their academic learning? My kid does not need to be at GMS physically. He needs to socialize. So let's find a way that you can take kids like mine and remove him from GMS. Let them do a remote learning with their friends because I don't want him in front of a computer all day. You had the Envisions textbooks, you sent home the vocabulary workbook, I had a textbook. Tell me what he needs to do every week. I'll have 6 kids at my kitchen table and we'll have a social interaction within what my family's comfortable with. that's 6 kids not in the district that now allow you to better serve the special needs students. There are better ways to serve the kids of this, the students of this district. And this plan that we've spent months on, we can do better. Thank you.
Hi. Oh, my name's Jessica Bergeron. I live at 69. You can't hear me. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? I live at 69 Charles Bancroft Highway. I have a student in elementary school, middle school, and high school. I also work as a speech-language pathologist for the Hudson School District. So I feel like, well, like many of the teachers in the room, I have that unique perspective where I have delivered remote services, and I have been burdened as a parent to assist my children in their education at home. And quite honestly, to say that remote learning was probably the most stressful thing I have experienced, and I have experienced stressful things, that is not an exaggeration. My biggest concern is that we have been presented with a plan where our children will be spending 60% of their instructional time at home doing remote learning. But as a parent, I don't know what that looks like. And I feel like it was a little short-sighted to present a hybrid approach without really giving us the details of what that will look like. And I don't feel like it's quite fair to just kind of pat us on the back and say, don't worry, we're working on it, it will be better, we know how awful it was the first time, it will be improved. As a parent, I would personally like to see not a minimum guidelines, but I would like to see a standard. What will my child's day look like? Will there be a check-in time? Will there be attendance taken? To say it's synchronous, what does that mean? And I would urge the board to accept nothing less. And then the other question I have is, I haven't heard anything about reassessment. So is this plan that's being proposed, is this for the school year? Certain aspects look like they were for the school year, but is the plan, if we go hybrid, would we reassess mid-year if things are looking good and there's a vaccine? And would we look for a way to reintroduce children back into schools full-time or increase those days? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Trixie Gardner. I'm at 66 Natticook. And I want to thank the task force and the board for all the work that you've put in. I know it's been difficult and time-consuming, and I truly appreciate that. I'm a mom of 2 boys, one who is a rising 3rd grader and an incoming kindergartner. And my concerns, or questions, I should say, relates to the remote model, or I guess my question is, will there be a full remote model for those parents that need that and want that? I encourage the board to consider the well-being of the students and our teachers. I emphasize I would ask you to please have compassion for those teachers who are asked to do something they've never have been asked or trained to do before. So when you think about the remote model, please consider what those teachers are going to be asked to do if they're going to be asked to teach and manage kids in Google Meets. And also consider our student. My son is not the loudest, is very quiet and shy. He would not be the one to ask or get attention through a computer asking for help in a teacher who is teaching remotely. I ask that you think about the students who have to stay home, who need to stay home, and what that remote model will look like. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see anything in writing tonight, and I think that leaves a lot of parents with a lot of questions and concerns. I would also like to ask that the task force spend some time in the classroom. Take the models that you are proposing and go test them out. Please go look at what the spacing looks like in the classroom, ride the school bus, show us what a classroom and what a day would look like. I think that would put a lot of ease in the parents. It would be helpful for me, who's deciding whether or not I would like remote or if a hybrid or full in-person classroom would work. I said that was my last thing, but I wanted to say one more thing. Please share what those the remote option would look like for the parents that are still teetering. I think what may happen is people who don't have an answer of what the remote model will look like may start looking for alternatives and may start finding other ways to teach their kids, whether that's homeschooling, VLACs, pods, and the implications of our enrollment will do to our budget for this coming year and for the future. Thank you.
Hi, so I'm Jillian Osmore. I live at 34 Page Road. I wanted to start with saying I'm happy with the proposal from the board. It sounds like a lot of people who came today, that's not a popular opinion, but I know that a lot of people actually are looking for a hybrid model. I will say as a parent and a healthcare provider, if there was not a hybrid model, my child would not be going to school. It is not safe. It is not, I go to work and see healthy patients and have to wear shields and gowns and stay 6 feet from people. There's no way that I would send my child to a school without some sort of reduced capacity. I also want to echo the statements about remote learning from last year. So I have 2 children, one will be in 5th grade and one will be in 8th grade. And I will say the middle school teaching last year was not teaching. They were assigned assignments, had to read them and teach them to themselves, and then actually do work. The amount of work that my straight A student spent was enormous, hours and hours doing her advanced math and all of her subjects. I also say that my other daughter has special education services, and I cannot imagine having to do that with her. I wanted to also say just kind of comments about the plan for lunch pickup on home days. We did do the lunch pickup during the remote learning where we picked up twice a week. As I'm an essential worker and my husband also works, we are both working full-time. So being able to pick up lunch 3 days a week is not really an option for us. So I think if for the students who remote, they should know how many there are. If they could have a bagged option where you pick up, like if my kids are at the end of the alphabet, so they would go Thursday, Friday, so if Monday I can pick up 3 days of food, that's probably feasible, but like I'm in the office seeing patients, so it's going to be difficult. There was something that I felt like wasn't addressed in the plan when I looked at it, and that is staff being allowed to move between schools. So my younger daughter, who has several learning disabilities, there's only one person in the district who is able to do her services and the type of program that she has, and that person's at the high school. So right now we're doing a remote, obviously, in the summer, but what will that look like during the year? Will she be allowed to go to LMS to provide her services? Ideally, I would like her to have one day. She gets 5 days a week of services from 2 different people. I would like her to have her 2 days of in-person, one from each, but that is something I didn't see addressed in any of the documents. The other thing that I had seen and didn't really see in the proposal is they talked a lot about maybe a plan for having kids participate in cleaning the school in terms of cleaning their desks and wiping down things. I'm not sure if that's still a plan or not. I will say that, again, as a healthcare worker, like I have to undergo hours and hours of training to know how to properly clean COVID, how to properly clean a desk. And so I assume that your janitorial staff will have to undergo training. And in my opinion, children are not qualified, even high schoolers, to do that training. So if you are not planning to have infection control training for all of your students, students should not be cleaning. End of story. And lastly, I debated whether or not to say this, but you continuously all ask us to be patient with you, and this is hard work, and we all agree that. I would just like to put it out there that I think it's also important that school board members are patient with teachers and families and staff members who maybe have differing opinions. And it's important that the commentary that we make is appropriate and professional. And that's all I'll say about that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brooke Roman, and I live at 153 Page Road. And as a soon-to-be 7th grader, I would really love to go back to school 5 days a week. And I'd also like to see a plan for band and chorus because I love those classes, and I'd hate to see them go. So that's all I really have to say.
Hi, Karen Roman, 153 Page Road. It's been a tribulation for all of you on this task force. I know that initially when this got going, Mr. Jetty, you had said that you were against the hybrid model for parenting, working families, things like that. And then I watched all of the videos that were posted, and I know we talked about the distancing in the classrooms and the measurements, and it was decided that there would be 44 students at the 3-foot distance, and then I know you had talked about maybe even doing like a 5.5-foot distancing model to fit. It looked like there needed to be about 18 students in a class, and 6 inches between somebody may not be that much of a difference. We are a population in Litchfield, I'm sure you all know this, of 8,641. Since the beginning of COVID in March, there have been 37 cases. So that's a lot of our population that did not, thankfully, get COVID. So I was wondering if that, and right now we're at the 1 to 4, but I'm assuming it's been a few weeks since I've seen our cases rise. So we may not have any cases of COVID. And I get the whole planning for the worst, hope for the best. But I would really hope that maybe we could find both an in-person and a hybrid model. I mean, an in-person and a remote model versus the hybrid going 2 days a week. My other question is who is going to teach? I've heard it asked a couple times. My son does not like the change. So having a teacher for 3 days versus having a teacher for 2 days, that consistency that we talk about in education, because you're going to have 2 teachers with different learning styles, and I get kids need to learn how to adapt and learn, but I just don't know how that's going to look. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for all the hard work.
Hi, my name is Debbie Breton. I live at 101 Talent Road. I have 8 kids, 5 of which have graduated, and 3 are still in school. It was spoken about before, the sports programs and how important it is for motivation for your students. My 4th son, who was involved in football, did not like school. Football was his motivation. He just finished his freshman year of college and he wants to be a doctor. Football drove him to do what he wanted to do, and I couldn't be more proud of him. And I think sports need to happen for these kids. They need an outlet so that they don't get into trouble. Now, my 3 youngest, I have one going into high school, one in 6th grade, and one going into 1st grade. My son in 1st grade has an IEP, and he cannot do remote learning. remote did not work. It didn't work for any of my children. We struggled, and at the end of the day, we all just cried. By the end of the school, I had had enough. I was burnt out because of the support I had to give my kids. My youngest child, every time I take out the computer now, he cries. He cannot do remote school. And my children need to go back to school full time. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you guys need my name and address again? You do? Okay. Sorry. And I apologize for coming up a second time. I'll make it quick. It's still super hot in here. At Liz Valancourt, 3 Crowell Court. So I'm going to ask you guys, I was uncomfortable saying this in the first place, which is why I sat down, because I know a lot of people on the, not a lot, but quite a few people on the Oversight Committee and the task force and stuff, and I want to make sure we separate personal from professional. I have to say I'm really disappointed to hear that a consensus was not reached or that a decision or a plan was not reached. That was the one job that that group of people had. I know it was hard. I'm sure it was unbelievably time consuming. You know, time away from your families and other things you guys had to do, and just to volunteer to do that, I wouldn't have wanted to do it myself. But the fact that you guys could not come to an agreement and present all of us parents and families with a plan or a choice, and that it had to go to the administrators, is super disappointing to probably most of us. I don't want to speak for other people, but to me, that was incredibly disappointing. Our principals and administrators should not have to do that. That was not their position to have to do that. We've heard from many people today. There are quite a few teachers who spoke today, either from Litchfield or from other towns like myself. You can read it online anywhere. Remote teaching for teachers was a nightmare. It was incredibly stressful. You know, I put in 12-hour days on a regular basis. You know, 6 to 6, my family didn't see me. Sadly, I had a classroom set up in my basement, so I didn't even know what time of day it was. And it didn't work. You know, I came out of remote teaching thinking I just spent a whole bunch of 12-hour days, and I didn't live up to my own expectations for the students that I had. So it doesn't work for teachers. You've heard from countless parents today. It doesn't work for parents. I mean, people are brought to tears thinking about doing remote learning again. You can give staff all the PD you want, and I'll be getting a whole lot in my district as well. Remote learning is not what's best for kids. Bottom line, you know, are there a few kids here and there who can say, yeah, my kid, you know, I was successful, or my children were successful, they did just fine? The truth is, the majority of children are not successful and are not getting the full benefits of their education remotely. They're not, bottom line. That's the way it is. You know, the statistics are, if we talk about social emotional learning being the #1 most important thing, you know, connections, communication, and making these kids socially and emotionally healthy, 25% of kids are showing signs of depression directly related to remote learning. 20% of kids, 1 in 5, anxiety issues directly related to remote learning. This is not a good model for our kids, and I think Litchfield is better than that. I think that we families deserve the opportunity and the choice to send our kids to school 5 days a week. Should there be a remote option? Absolutely. There are kids and families with health issues, you know, compromised immune systems that have to have their kids at home. Absolutely, there should be a remote option, and we can think creatively and make that happen. We deserve the opportunity and the choice to have our kids in school 5 days a week, because Litchfield is better than that. We should not be going remote. We should not. All right, thank you. And I promise I won't come back up again.
Hi. I actually don't live around here. I am Melissa Miner, and I am the volleyball coach here at Campbell High School for the 4th year. I know that sports is not as important as education, and I support all of the decisions that are made in accordance to what's best for our children. I can honestly tell you, as a coach for 20-something years, that these kids thrive better in school when they are playing sports, when they are competing against another team or even competing against themselves in practice. I have had many kids throughout the years who have struggled in school before they started coming into sports. We work with them every single time that they do have a struggle. We let them come late to practice. We let them take their tests, whatever the situation is, to make sure that their education comes first. And that's the forefront of sports. What I can tell you is this summer, we were granted permission, football and I were granted permission to work outside with our kids. Started off small, 9 kids in a group, single practice. That means they couldn't do anything with another player. In the 85, 90 degree weather, just so you know, I'm an indoor sport. Then we were allowed 2 weeks later after 4th of July to increase that number to 15 kids with small groups between 3 and 4 kids where they could actually share a volleyball. My time is also spent taking Lysol and spraying every single ball after every single drill to make sure that we are safe. And that's what we are trying to do. I cannot answer the questions that some of you may have, whether or not we would get it or not get it. What I can tell you is that most of these kids missed their spring sport. They didn't play lacrosse. They didn't play baseball. They didn't play softball. And now we're talking about taking away volleyball, soccer, and football for these young men and women. That is not really good mentally for these children, young adults. They need sports. They've also been socializing all summer long. Look at your crowds. Sometimes if you look at your crowds, parents are socializing all summer long. I see it every time I have a practice outside. The parents are talking. The kids come in cars with other parents. They have been together. I don't know what's right or wrong, whether it's safe or not safe. I know for a fact that I have done everything I can to make sure it's safe for my kids when we are doing volleyball. Thank you.
April Weber, 38 Charles Bancroft Highway. I have 3 kids in the system, in our school system, 1 at Campbell, 2 at GMS. That's not what I came here for. I came here that I would ask you to consider the working families and the single families. I have foster families, although not in this district, that will struggle greatly with remote learning. So much so that some families decided they could no longer keep those children and that they will remote learn this fall and it will be overwhelming. I understand this is not an easy task. I ask you to reconsider and put forward a full-time and a full-time out option, in and out. Maybe get another survey, find out how many are willing to do remote and how many are willing to stay in school. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I have the floor? Are we still doing, there's no residents left me? Okay, thank you. For those, I won't give you my address because I'm a Litchfield teacher. I don't live in Litchfield. I'm also the president of the local association, the LEA. I'm afraid if I gave you my address, I live in Hooksett, but some of you after I speak would come and clobber me later on this week, so I'll keep my address to myself. Can you guys hear me? Oh, sorry. My name is Patrick Keefe. Excuse me? I was joking. I was being facetious. I don't think anyone's going to come to my door and clobber me. Sorry, I was trying to bring some levity to this situation. I apologize. This is, a serious situation. None of us signed up for this last spring on March 13th when suddenly we sort of packed up our bags and we went to this new model of instruction, which was remote instruction. Up until then, a lot of the language that we now are familiar with in remote instruction, we didn't even know. So teachers were asked to, switch gears and instruct in a model that they weren't accustomed to. Now, at the high school, we did have 4 years with Chromebooks, so I think the transition for some of us was fairly easy, or a little bit less complicated than maybe at the middle school, who had the Chromebooks for less time, and the elementary school, who I don't believe they had the Chromebooks yet, right? So I just want to say for teachers, I understand the frustration, but we did our best to build the plane while we were flying it, and we worked really hard. And I know the Litchfield teachers, gave it their all. Okay, and it wasn't easy. It was a challenge for all of us. I just want to say, though, as we look to reopen our schools, there's no one size that fits all. Okay, there are various competing interests just in the association itself, the LEA, and then students and parents and administrators, the school board. There's a myriad of competing interests, so this isn't easy, and there's not going to be a solution that pleases everyone. But if we try to work together on this, and don't cast aspersions on one another, and just have a lot of mutual respect, because I'm teaching in Litchfield because I love the students and I love the community. That's why I'm here. Okay, and 99.9% of the other LE members are the same way. We love the kids, we love teaching, and I just want you to remember that. We want to be here, we want to be teaching. Some of you had talked about giving a choice to students today and families. If they want to go remote, let them go remote. If they want to be here full-time, let them be here full-time. I agree with that. But teachers should also have choice. We're human beings too. Teachers should also have the option to teach remote, full-time. If there are ADA accommodations, okay, because they have a teacher has a medical condition that warrants an ADA accommodation, then the district is going to try to comply with ADA regulations and allow that teacher, whatever that accommodation might be, which may or may not include a remote option. However, there are a number of teachers that just don't feel comfortable returning in this very difficult, climate. This is new to all of us, and they have anxieties and fears. I've listened to members call me up and cry. And I think that we should pay them the respect that they deserve. They're in this community, and they're working hard, and they love working here, and I think they deserve that option, that choice. So I think teacher choice is really important. The NEA has released a reopening plan in which they're saying teachers shouldn't be returning to school if certain conditions aren't met. And one of those conditions is the HVAC systems in schools. Most schools do not have up-to-grade HVAC systems, even under current circumstances. Under non-COVID circumstances. But now with COVID, they have even less, it's even more complicated, let me put it that way. So I don't think, the LEA right now doesn't have anything specific, and I know that Corey and the district is working on getting some evidence, some documentation that verifies that the HVAC systems are working properly and we have proper air circulation within our district. But right now, the LEA doesn't have confirmation of that. There are a number of safety concerns for teachers. We all want to be back here. We love teaching. That's what we want to do. And sometimes solutions sound simple. One of the things that some of you guys have said, and I know Brian Bork brought it up in a task force meeting, is why can't we live stream the classrooms? But then, you know, the school board, the superintendent, Dr. Jetty, they speak to legal. The LEA, we speak to our legal team, and it's FERPA violations, okay? And I know that they're looking into that further. But there may be FERPA violations, and then, you know, I've had teachers and parents say, well, why don't the students in the classroom just waive their rights, sign a waiver? But they can't waive federal law. So there are issues here. It seems like there's easy solutions, but please let's not use platitudes and let's not cast aspersions on each other. The Litchfield teachers love this community. We want to be here. We want to be in school working. We just want to make sure that we're doing it in a safe environment. So thank you, school board members, the SAU, and all the parents that care so much. And these are the best kids in the state. And thank you for the opportunity to allow us to teach them. And thank you for the floor today.
I was thinking, like, well, no one's coming up.
Hi all, I'm Tina Harrison. I'm speaking officially as Vice Chair of the school board. As Vice Chair, it's my job to read the correspondence into the minutes at each meeting. I know that we've gone long and we anticipated that, but I have 31 emails from concerned parents and residents. They all have different preferences. They all have different requests to make of the school board. And I think most of them were sent to me because they could not be here today and because there was no opportunity, well, we thought, for live streaming. So if you're willing to bear with me, I would like to give all of these residents their time, their 2 minutes, and read through the emails, if that's all right. Thank you. I'm going to go sit down, though. What is? Yeah, I read fast. I'll email them to you, Michelle. You don't have to write them down. Okay, let's see. I'm going to go according to the ones that I received first. That means Erica Egan. Where are you? What's that? I'm so sorry. Bear with me. This was pulled up, I swear. Okay. Wait, before I start, are there other people who want to say something? I see people leaving in droves. Is there any more community input from the people in attendance? Okay. What's that? No, that's okay. If you want to come in, you want me to read it for you? All right. My experience is in teaching first grade, so I'm a really good storyteller. Okay. Dear Dr. Jetty and members of the school board, I wanted to send a note expressing my opinion on the potential of offering a hybrid model. I'm not sure that I'm comfortable sending my 2 children, PK and first grade, back to school full-time given the challenges with social distancing, etc. My children have not been inside a public place since March 13th, so I'm struggling with the thought of sending them back to school and at the same time struggling with the thought of full-time remote learning. That said, I think a hybrid option is a good alternative only if the siblings are part of the same cohort and if the structuring is well thought out. And actually, she proposes a model that is exactly the model that we presented today. I'll skip that part. It's not lost on me that you've been given an enormous task and that no matter what is decided, there will be people who are unhappy, as there is truly no one-size-fits-all in this situation. Thank you for your consideration. I look forward to seeing this final plan so we can decide how best to move on for our family. What's that? It was from Erica Ruggles. This is from Kate Stevens, who I believe spoke earlier today. Is Kate still here? No? Do you want me to read it, Kate? We covered it? Okay. Carrie Douglas, would you like me to read your email? That's true. I think you covered it. Yep, okay. Deb Kovacsars. All right, Deb says, to whom it may concern. I also sent a message via Google Doc. Then I saw that concerns should be sent to this email. I have 2 students attending Campbell. I have multiple concerns and suggestions about the hybrid model of alternating freshmen and sophomore and junior and seniors, with Friday being remote for all. So this is in regards to a hybrid model that would divide students into cohorts according to their grade levels instead of by their last name, which I don't think is on the table at this point. So let's see. I'm very concerned if the school is segregated by grades that my student will experience what he did in middle school. As far as remote learning, I have no worries about my senior. She did great. My son, on the other hand, did not. I spent 2 to 3 hours daily with him, and he still had a hard time. She talks about the struggles with remote learning, and her concerns are segregating the classes and not having structured remote days. So that was from Debbie Kovacsars. Susan Rafferty, are you still here, Sue? You're good? Okay. Amy Steiniger? Oh, that's you. All right. Did you want me to read it? Yes? Okay. I felt the need to share today. It's my belief that we need to move forward. We as partners can help this community do that. We need to get our kids back to school. I've experienced firsthand this spring that the remote learning we participated in from a younger child at GMS was not learning and there was no teaching. Please do not be blind to what occurred in the spring. There may have some positives, but remote can never replace in-school learning. Please do not let fear and the politics driving the fear rule you. Yes, the disease is real, but if we all follow protocols, we can do this. If you must do any remote learning, do not eliminate school days. Work through it. Be creative. Allow families to make a choice, but use the tools and technology to allow for remote learning that is inclusive and meaningful. Do not allow teachers to be absent from the solution. If they want to teach, we need to help them do this with tools and resources, but this spring cannot be a repeat. I think we all agree on that. Please get our kids back to school 5 days a week with the option of remote learning for whoever thinks it's best for their family. In my opinion, remote learning at this stage is not good for anyone, but I appreciate others' perspectives. I ask again to be creative and be thoughtful in your planning. If teachers want to go back to what they love, then they need to be teaching 5 days a week, regardless of how unconventional the methods. We have time to figure it out, keep the communication open, and be cautious with any decisions that reduce or eliminate physically attending school. Sincerely, Amy Steiniger. Jocelyn Rajo. Dear school board members, I'm capable of keeping my 7-year-old daughter home next year and will likely choose to do so. Will the school be able to provide any resources like lending out textbooks or sharing the class curriculum so I can keep my daughter on track to re-enter school when it feels safer? Sally Alwan. Dear School Board, I'm delighted to hear that you have made progress in the reopening plans. I'm unsure if I'm able to attend today. However, I do have some thoughts and ideas. As a primary care physician in the community who treats COVID patients, I feel the safety and students of the teachers is invaluable. COVID is a serious illness with disastrous consequences for both children and adults. I feel that the reopening plan should definitely allow for each child to be separated 6 feet apart from any other child. The importance of that is to prevent child-to-child transmission. This distance separation is very important. Also, for middle school and high school, limiting the number of children in the hallways and in the building itself is important, as spread can easily happen at the lockers, the bathrooms, and communal spaces. I'm in full support of a hybrid model that would allow smaller numbers of children inside the building at a given time. One day on, one day at home model. As long as there is adequate separation by children, I think it would be reasonable. A parent mentioned something along the lines of plexiglass barriers. However, new evidence provided by NEJM shows that the COVID virus easily goes above and over any such barrier. If such barriers are implemented, children still need to be 6 feet apart regardless, due to the scientific evidence of lack of efficacy. Again, physical social distancing is key to keeping the children safe while they are in the building. If you have any questions from me or would like to have Dartmouth-Hitchcock's official recommendations for pediatrics, please do not hesitate to reach out to me at any time. Jennifer Burke. Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to take some time to share my experiences with COVID-19 and also my opinions on the reopening of schools. Much of my opinion is based on my own personal experience since early March. For those who are unaware, I work for the Home Depot. My role is a district human resource manager supporting 2,300 hourly associates and 65 salaried leaders across 2 states. Needless to say, the differences in these markets can vary greatly. Since Saturday, March 7th, my job has been almost exclusively dedicated to helping our associates through the COVID-19 pandemic, often 7 days a week. I believe that my experience mirrors several aspects of school reopening. Many of the processes, policies, benefits, and safety measures that THD instituted are relevant and could be of assistance to the district as well. Do you think Jen would mind if I summarize? So here are some facts she supplied based on her experience to date. We have had 18 cases across the district, all based in Massachusetts stores. None of my associates who tested positive were hospitalized or died. Most cases were asymptomatic. There have been no documented cases of COVID-19 in any of my New Hampshire stores. There have been no community spread cases where an associate has given COVID-19 to another associate. Here are the steps we took to keep our associates safe. Masks are required for all associates and now all customers. Note that since the institution of masks for all associates, we've only had 1 positive case. That individual was tested because he was going to vacation in Maine and was asymptomatic. Plexiglass barriers in all close contact areas. Physical distancing where possible of 6 feet. There are many places where that is not possible for our associates, so we advise them to be sure to practice proper hygiene when placed in these situations. We secured tons of PPE for our associates, including masks, gloves, and more hand sanitizer than you can imagine. Frequent sanitation of all common areas, break rooms, training rooms, restrooms, and equipment, registers and handheld phones. Educational campaign for all associates that includes reminders to not touch your face, physical distancing, and wash your hands. By mid-August, all of my stores will have temperature scans at the time clock. Associates will be required to complete a home health check and fill out a Google form confirming their temperature. Their temperature will be taken again before they clock in to work and back in from lunch. We added early on an additional 80 hours of sick time for all full-time and salaried employees. High-risk associates were provided an additional 160 hours of sick time for full-time and 80 for PT. This time will not be paid out if unused for salaried associates only. We conduct contact tracing after each positive case. According to the CDC, if associates test positive, they are sent a wellness kit to their home, paid in full, and receive regular check-ins from the SM and DHRM, and cannot return to work until 2 negative tests or 15 days have passed. I fully understand the concerns of our teachers face around returning to the classroom. Quite frankly, I too was scared as to what would happen when I returned. Additionally, I have 2 daughters that work for Home Depot in Nashua. I'm in stores 3 to 4 days a week. I wear a mask and I wash my hands frequently. I interact with associates and customers daily. Physical distancing is not always possible, and when it isn't, I be sure to take a moment to wash my hands or utilize hand sanitizer. I'm going to skip down further. I believe that the district takes a similar approach with the associates' safety and security as their top priority. That would be the teachers and staff, and the safety of their and security of their customer, the students. We can make a safe return to school. And she's also very upset about the decision to cancel sports, which she outlines in great detail. Cindy Caleri? Did she go? Okay. Cindy and both of her sons actually wrote to the school board appreciating our effort, and the boys were very in favor of maintaining our fall sports schedule as recommended by the NHIAA. She's realistic that there might come a time where our numbers may increase and the need for all students to resume remote may be necessary. However, there's no indication that in-person learning would be detrimental to the community at this time. She thinks providing an option for families to continue remote learning would then reduce class sizes for in-person learning, but she advocates for a 5-day-a-week schedule. Josh Bremberg. I'm writing to you to share my view of the reopening options for the Litchfield School District. I'm a 20-year-old veteran teacher and have 1 child currently at LMS. My hope is that the hybrid is not being considered. Litchfield is a small community that consists of many 2-parent working families who are returning to work if they haven't already. This option may work for other towns, but I can see it as a major problem for families in Litchfield. It will not work without the full-time supervision at home necessary for students of these ages. Social emotional well-being for students of this age is crucial. They need to be in school interacting with teachers and their peers. That was a summary from Josh Brenberg. Kate Kirby. Not here. Kate wrote in support of continuing with fall sports, and many of her sentiments echo the ones that have already been expressed. So in the interest of time, I'm going to skip ahead. Carrie Scopelitis has 3 sons who graduated, and her 4th will be entering 9th grade. She speaks in favor of keeping the fall sports schedule and asked the board to reconsider that decision. Jen Byron. Do you want me to read it? Please consider the NHIAA decision to give fall sports the green light to proceed at their own discretion at Litchfield schools this fall. With proper safety precautions, it would be extremely beneficial if the students can have some sort of athletic season this fall, especially at the high school level. I have a sophomore playing volleyball and a freshman who's been practicing with a soccer team all summer in scrimmage sessions with the hope of making the team. My daughter was the captain of the JV volleyball team last year, and the confidence she gained from her fall season at CIHS was immeasurable. My son has been playing club soccer and training with his teammates over the summer, following safety protocols and guidelines during that time, and no cases have been reported in that small group. Continuing to train with the high school soccer team and having a fall season would be extremely beneficial as he starts his freshman year at Campbell. I summarized a little bit. Let's see. Courtney Landry is a teacher and member of the task force in a neighboring town. She appreciates all who are involved in making these decisions. There is no right answer. Whether the board decides to offer an option for in-school remote learning or chooses a hybrid, masks should be required for all students and staff. And she also requests that we reconsider fall sports running as normal. Tom Adamakis. He did speak. Liz wanted him to speak loudly. His email reflects his sentiments. He is pro sports for the fall. Amy Daigle. Let's see. I'm going to summarize again. For what it's worth, I'm compelled to write you this morning to provide my perspective on sports at the high school level continuing. Many kids in town are currently playing sports. These kids will continue to play sports even if the SAU decides against it. With the governor and NHIAA giving the green light, AAU and club sports are anxiously waiting on the sidelines to scoop up these kids. Sadly, if this happens, the school will never get many of those athletes back. The reality is that families will find a way to pay the thousands of dollars for those teams, and many kids will continue to play at a higher level. The mental and physical well-being of many of these kids desperately depends on playing sports. And she asserts that high school sports would be the safest option, as the SAU could ensure safety guidelines are followed. So I will... Jen Abdenor? She's not here. I'm writing to you as full-time working parents. Our son Jackson will be entering freshman this year. He's currently active playing sports for Seacoast United Soccer Club team, practicing with the high school team. The decision is very challenging, but let's see. She would like to put a positive word in for at least a hybrid model and the need to allow kids to play sports. We did complete the online surveys. Jackson's been playing sports, so she advocates further for a fall season at the high school. And please allow for the option for the children to return to school and continue with sports. Katie Cameron writes that she hopes virtual learning will fit our family best right now because we live with family members that are immunocompromised. She advocates for she indicates that she's interested in the remote model, and she's wondering if the district would have the flexibility to allow parents to access the curriculum materials and to keep the kids going at their own pace at home. Let's see. Cheryl Lavoie. Okay. She writes in to advocate. Let's see. I'm so sorry. She's very concerned about the hybrid possibility. She's kept up with watching the task force videos, and hybrid didn't really seem like an option at the time. She had her students had a very difficult time with remote learning, and she expresses concern about the possibility of sports not happening. Let's see, Justin Summers. I'm emailing out of concern regarding the reopening meeting. My main concern is that the meeting is held only in person. He was not able to attend today and was hoping we would be able to stream the meeting live. Nicole Wilson. She's not here either. She's a parent of 3 children in Litchfield. She has 2 children on IEPs, and the remote learning that happened in the spring was very difficult for them. GMS did a great job with her son. Her other students did not have a positive experience. These kids cannot emotionally or educationally have remote learning again. My 2 high school kids felt overwhelmed all the time. Sports, this is a must-have for high school athletes. It's not just about playing a sport. It's a way to get frustration out. It's a mental break and a great way to do what they love. Let's see. Paul Byron. Should I read it? Paul is a parent of 2 high school students, as well as being a teacher in another local New Hampshire district. I understand the difficulty of the situation, but I have questions and concerns. My first question is in regard to course offerings. Will students be able to complete all the courses that they have signed up for in the spring? With the hybrid format, I'm concerned that my daughter and son will not be able to follow the educational course track they are following in order to prepare them for college. Did we address that a little? Somewhat? Okay. My second question is in regards to high school sports. I'm wondering why and how the decision was made to eliminate some high school sports but not others. I feel all sports should be occurring this fall, as this is a major part of social and emotional well-being of students. Many students have already put in time for off-season training. The argument of limiting their interactions with each other or students from other schools is not valid, as many have had social contact with outside club teams, part-time work, or other social interactions already. Thanks, Paul. Kristen Adamakis. Actually, it's from Drew Adamakis. Drew plays football for Campbell and would like to know who came up with the plan to cancel fall sports and why they thought this was a good idea. For me, playing football was a great way for me to end my day. It allowed me to go be with my friends and do something I love. Sometimes the only reason I would get out of bed was because of football. I'm going to sum up that he echoes his sentiments of his father and his mom. Let's see, Alex Kirby feels that it would be unfair for us to cancel their season after the hard work and effort that all the teams have put in. He's speaking for the soccer team personally, as they've gotten together and played soccer with each other almost every day. That's from Alex Kirby. Travis Tucker wrote with concern for the scheduling, the 4x4 model, and AP courses. And Heather Portillo emailed that there should be an option to either have your child go 5 days a week or do remote per quarter or semester, rather than having to commit for the full year. Thank you for bearing with me. That was the last one.
All right, so with that, all the remaining people that are here, I'd like to say thank you for coming and bearing the heat in this gymnasium. I think there's been a lot of good interaction, and I appreciate everyone coming out. So with that, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We're now adjourned. Thank you very much.